hundreds of souls held captive.
It lives to kill. Witness an unspeakable evil.
You have killed, and you will kill again.
Call the police! Somebody call the police! Peggy, what happened?
Okay, everyone, you have half an hour, and then off to that ambulance.
Mark, how'd you find me?
I can't tell you right away.
Inspector, this person looked like a big cat. A big red sort of crimson cat.
Ah, well, I must say that's interesting.
Hi people, this is Gianni Lombardo Radice from Stage Fright, and you are listening to the Hysteria Continues.
Yes, indeed. Welcome back to the Hysteria Continues, and if you hadn't guessed, which is why we've got Johnny back, it's a all Giallo episode number 20, and we got a double feature this week from the hallowed year of 1975, which is Eyeball and Deep Red, two very different Giallos, but a good kind of indication of what the Giallo is. And we're going to be talking a little bit more about that in a little bit. Before we start, what I might do is just put on a little background music. This is Ennio Morricone's soundtrack from Forbidden Photos of a Lady Above Suspicion, to go on in the background for us while we chat. But first of all, introduce you actually to our black-gloved hotties. First across the pond, Erik.
Well, I've changed my name to Edwige.
Oh, have you?
Yeah,
very
that's
classy.
how I want to be referred to in the future. Yeah.
What? Because you are the queen, the Giallo.
I am.
Okay.
And I like to be nude.
Oh, okay. Are you nude at the moment?
No, because I live in Ireland, and being nude would lead to pneumonia.
Oh. How about further across a bigger pond? We have Joseph. How are you today?
I am good, and let us celebrate our 20th episode with the adding of chocolate to milk.
Oh.
I forgot it was our 20th episode.
Yeah.
Yes.
We're in, the big 2-0. So that's good. What? No, here we go.
The big 2.
Yeah, 2-0, I'm saying.
Yeah.
And
It started already.
I know. And Nathan, how are you doing?
I'm alright. How are you?
I'm okay. Let me just turn this down a little bit, because I think it's starting to... as wonderful it is, I don't want it to drown us out. Oops. But what I will do to get the party started, I have next to me a bottle of J&B whiskey, which if you can hear from... if you watch many Giallo, you'll know that this is a drink of choice for killers and scantily clad ladies. So I hope you'll join us in a little tipple.
I'm drinking a Powerade Mountain Berry Blast. No alcohol.
Well, we should add...
early.
Yeah, we should add
It's
it's 11 a.m. for Nathan and Joseph, whereas it's 4 p.m. for myself and Justin.
That is true. That's true.
Well,
No,
Justin's been drinking since 11 a.m., so it doesn't really matter.
Possibly, yeah.
I have not had a drink since last night. It's my first drink. And if you believe that, you'll believe anything. Before we get started, just wanted to throw out a few plugs to some of our friends. We've got... there's been a previous Giallo podcast by the excellent Movie Matters. And Erik, you've heard that, haven't you? So
I have it. It's absolutely brilliant. Really, really good.
Yeah. So if you search for Movie Matters on iTunes, you should bring that up. Also, another plug out to Louis, who writes for the Hysteria Continues, Hysteria Lives. He's got a new slasher movie blog called A Slash Above, and that's a/above, all one word, .com. That's definitely worth a read. And also the wonderful Meep, who is always on the Body Count Continues and an all-round wonderful guy. He's doing 31 days of 80 slashers for Halloween. So if you fancy listening to that, and it's definitely, well, not even listening, actually reading that, it's definitely worth a look. You can see that at www.cinemadumeep.com. And if you want to check that out, I'll put the link up on the Hysteria Lives Facebook page. So check those out. Before we get started, guys, should we do a little bit of feedback?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, who wants to go first?
I'll go.
Okay. What have you got, Joseph?
I'm sorry, what did you say?
No, what have you got for us?
Oh, okay. This is from our good friend Jake Hilgren. He lives in Los Angeles, and he's a longtime member of the Body Count Continues. But he writes in and says, "Hey guys, just getting around to the Stage Fright podcast, and the top 3 shouldn't have died. Yes, I'm behind, I know. Some really great stuff here, and definitely agree on the Diana Barrows, Leslie Donaldson, and Sarah Michelle Gellar accounts. Sarah Michelle's Helen would have been my number 1 hands down. I gotta admit, I actually cried the first time I saw I Know What You Did Last Summer when she was killed. And I hope Jennifer Love Hewitt's character felt terrible for being such a bitch to her before finding her body, or after finding her body, I'm sorry. But since I can't choose her, my 3 would have been Jennifer Rubin as Taryn in A Nightmare on Elm Street 3. She's just such a badass, and even though her death is awesome, would have been nice to see her do some more damage. Peter Barton in Hell Night and or Friday the 13th, the final chapter. He's so likable and hands down my favorite early 80s horror guy, and has such survivor potential that's never really utilized in either film. Does he really have to die in both films? And his number 1 is Lenora Zahn in American Nightmare. She does wonders with her devil's stripper pitchfork. So much I had to homage it in my first short film. And she's so likable as the sweet, misunderstood stripper Tina, who just can't quit the comfort of her job to allow her overbearing boyfriend to take control of her life. She'd rather show her tits than become some trophy wife. Shouldn't that count for something? I would have much rather seen her die in visiting hours or Happy Birthday to Me. By the way, would love to see Lisa Langlois, is that her name, I think? Yeah. Her Happy Birthday to Me cut death scene released. Perhaps we should start a new Trailblazer campaign to make that happen. Jake Hilgren.
Excellent, and thank you, Jake. And if you didn't know, Jake, who I've known for many years now, actually from probably almost as long as I've known you, Joseph, he's actually making inroads in Hollywood at the moment. He lives in West Hollywood, and he is the writer of a new slasher movie coming out called Homecoming. I think is it Homecoming? I hope that's right, Jake.
Bloody Homecoming?
Oh, Bloody Homecoming, that's right. And actually, I hope to have him on the show at some point soon to have a chat about that and how to actually make a success in Hollywood writing slasher movies. So that should be pretty exciting. No, thanks for that, Joseph. You got any others?
Yeah, I got a couple more. This is from Carl. He writes in and says, "Hey guys, just wanted to send a quick bit of praise to you just to make sure you keep making these awesome podcasts. I've been trying to find a podcast similar to yours for a long time. I'm listening to numerous horror-related podcasts, and they're all shit. Just a bunch of kids talking out of their asses with as many fucks as they can throw in. Not that I mind cussing at all, just not every second word. You guys have an amazing wealth of knowledge. Since listening, I've tracked down at least 20 movies I hadn't heard of, just based on some of your passing recommendations. Rituals, Dead by Dawn, Stage Fright, The Slayer, and many others. I've been trying to spread your podcast to as many people as I can. Thank you very much. Now that I'm hooked, I don't know what I'd do if you guys stopped. Keep up the awesome work. Cheers and thanks, Carl."
Oh, thank you, Carl. Yes,
thank you very much, Carl.
You'll never hear a swear word on this podcast, as regular listeners will know.
I'm kind of curious as to which one of us swears the most. I think it's Joseph.
Yeah.
That's fucking bullshit, God.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, I got one more. This is from our good friend Tosca Topsocks.
Woo! Hey, Tosca.
And he says, "Hey guys, I hope that you are all well. Just about halfway through the Splatter You podcast. From an earlier podcast, it was very interesting to learn that they may be making a found footage Friday the 13th film. How on earth could this be achieved? Whilst pondering on this, I have come up with the perfect screenplay. The setting, the latest season of Big Brother. Jason stumbles out of the woods, blindly heading into the TV studio where Big Brother has just launched. The crowds have gone, and all we have left are the TV crew and the brand new housemates. The TV crew are all mercilessly butchered by Jason, by pick, by axe, by. Then Jason finds a discarded head cam on the bloodied floor, and off he goes to introduce himself to the housemates. Meanwhile, all the new mates are settling in. I'm sorry?
That's all right. You just had a little vocal blip there. but carry on.
Oh, okay. Anyway, meanwhile, all of the new housemates are settling in for their first night in the house. Justin, Erik, Nathan, and Joseph quickly form an alliance and start bitching about the girls in the house, Toya and Susie and Dana Kamel. Erik glares at Susie. Justin hisses at Toya. Nathan and Joseph stare at Dana, who stands there woodenly, transfixed. Toya is in tears, having found out that her comeback single has been pipped to the #1 spot by smash hit cat flushing a toilet. Susie slaps Toya to calm her down, leaving Dana shell-shocked, with mouth opening and closing like a goldfish. Erik tries to comfort Toya whilst Justin and Susie laugh and point. Joseph and Nathan, meanwhile, have a karaoke sing-off to the Dirty Dancing soundtrack. Scream loudly as the diary room door bursts open. A silhouetted Jason standing there holding a machete aloft. Justin reacts boldly, throwing Toya into the path of Jason. Susie cheers, but it's too late. Jason has her in his grip. Justin faints and has to be revived by Joseph and Nathan fanning him with a copy of Teenage Wasteland. Dana, deciding that she no longer wants to be the final girl, charges into Jason, smashing him through the window where they both fall to their doom. Justin, Erik, Nathan, and Joseph make horror movie history by becoming the final boys. As they leave the house, they look to see where Jason's body lies, but it's disappeared. The boys walk off into the moonlight, and all that is left of their ordeal is the footage that will be found. So you see, guys, it can be done. Take care and keep up the fantastic work, Tosca Toss Socks.
Wow. Thank you, Tosca.
That was excellent, Tosca. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much. It could happen. It could happen, couldn't it? Who knows?
Yes, and that's all I have for this week.
Yes. Stranger things have happened, like Toya having a top 10 hit, but they...
She had 3 top 10 hits in 1981.
How many did she have in 82?
0.
Okay. Anyway, moving on. Erik, have you got any feedback?
I do, yeah. We've got another message from a filmmaker, actually. He says, "Hey guys, my name's Rob Ward. First, just want to say I love the podcast. You guys are super entertaining, and at this point I feel like I know all you 4 so well, and it would be rad if you guys could somehow get together and do a podcast in person at some of these conventions. A couple of questions. First off, I'm an independent filmmaker that takes part in a 3-day horror film competition. That's write, direct, and edit in 3 days. And I was thinking it would be fun if you guys could see some independent horror. I'm not sure if people bug any of you to watch these crappy movies, but it would be interesting to hear some feedback or to hear you tear the movies apart. Secondly, this is mostly for Justin. I'll send some links to the website of the contest, and I'm looking for some sponsors for the premiere night. We've got Dark Horse Comics involved, as well as local comic stores and a few other people. And I thought this would be a pretty cool way to get the word out about the podcast and Hysteria Lives site, as well as an introduction to Teenage Wasteland before its US release. I live in Portland, Oregon, by the way. And then he goes on to give us the links, which I might get you to put on the Facebook page, Justin, because they're quite long-winded and probably not worth reading out over the air. But his Twitter address is PDX if anyone wants to write that down. And he says, "Thanks for your time, and let me know what you guys think. Rob Ward."
Okay, well, thank you, Rob. Yeah, I'll definitely consider that. I have a budget of about 52p, which is about 75 cents, but who knows? Strange things happen, but we certainly can help.
If he wants to send in some of those independent films, I will watch and critique them for the podcast.
Okay,
definitely.
Great. Yeah, well, that sounds good. We'll do that, Rob. That sounds, great. Okay, and Erik, have you got anything else?
I do. I've got 2 more. I've got one from our friend Remy from the from the Body Count Continues forums. He says, "Hello, Justin, Joseph, Erik, and Nathan. I wanted to let you know that overall I love the podcasts. Great job, guys. They're fun, and the passion you all have for the genre is evident. I really enjoyed the top 3 slasher trailers. All were good choices. Mine would be the TV trailer for The Funhouse, titled Haunted House, the TV trailer for Happy Birthday to Me, and the impossible to find alternate My Bloody Valentine trailer, the one that starts with Hollis at the party asking if anyone wants a beer. I know we all appreciate the interviews. Unfortunately, a good bunch of them all sound the same. The performers are asked to talk about a job they had 25 to 30 years ago. That would be tough for any one of us to do. What they do have is they can watch the movie and hopefully remember things from the shoot, but surprisingly, it sounds like few of them rewatched the movie before the interviews. Strange. I have more behind-the-scenes info about Splatter University that I need to scan for you guys. It really goes into the hells of the production. It was featured in Cinemagic magazine. So keep up the good work, gents. And Joseph, I hope you get around to talking about the 2-disc DVD set of Dead Hunt. Cheers, Remy. I assume he's joking about a 2-disc DVD set of Dead Hunt.
Actually, I have the 2-disc DVD set of Dead Hunt.
It exists?
Yes, I got a copy from him at Monster Mania. It's not a bad little independent slasher film. I enjoyed it.
And what about the behind-the-scenes information on Splatter University? I'm sure you'd love to see that.
Well, Nathan
Justin.
would. I would.
Justin would.
Yeah, so all the prep they put into it. But Remy makes an interesting point, actually, about people watching the films before they talk to us. Because I would have thought, if I'd been in a movie 30 years ago, and obviously I'm far too young to have been in a movie 30 years ago.
Of course.
But I would be, I'd be quite proud of it. Maybe depending if it was Splatter University, maybe not. But I'm surprised actually how few people actually seem to watch the films before they talk to us. But I think we do get some interesting stuff out of them, and we're one of the only podcasts that I listen to that actually goes to the lengths to actually track these people down. And it's a real shame that we couldn't get anyone, talk about a Deep Red. But we don't have an Italian translator, and actually, when we come to talking about the films, I mean, they've got like a transatlantic cast from some English people who are now dead, mostly Italians, Argentinians, people from Spain. I mean, all sorts of different people. So it is always going to be a little bit more difficult. But well, thank you, Remy. Have you got another one, Erik?
I've got one more. This is from John Woodward. He says, "Hello, gentlemen. I haven't written in a while, so I thought I'd drop you a line. Just finished the Incubus podcast, and you guys have done a bang-up job as usual. This film was shot in Guelph, I think it's Guelph, Guelph, Ontario, which is about 40 minutes away from my hometown of Stratford. And you're right, Justin, when you wondered if the quarry in Funeral Home was the same one. It's located in Elora, Ontario, which is about an hour and a half from me. They filmed bits of James Wan's Dead Silence there as well. On another note, I have a book to recommend to you lads. Butcher Knives and Body Counts, edited by Vince Liaguno. I'm having trouble with pronunciation today, sorry. Vince Liaguno. It contains about 70 plus essays on slasher films, and it's a real treat. Of course, it is not really in the same league as, say, Teenage Wasteland, and is nowhere near as decorative, but I think all of you will get something from it. Oh. In the meantime, I am now embarking on my 4th annual Shocktoberfest, 31 nights of horror films throughout October. Do any of you subject your respective spouses or significant others to this kind of event? I heartily recommend it, although my wife is threatening to leave me. And that's with cheers from now from John Woodward.
John, I sympathise. I've actually got...
I need to mention that the Butcher Knives and Body Counts, our friend Amanda has a essay in that book.
Yeah, I've got it ordered from Amazon.com, so I haven't got it yet, but I'm very much looking forward to it. It sounds great. So, yeah.
Yes, I'm going to get a copy as well.
Cool, excellent.
Yeah.
Well,
so do any of us subject significant others to 31 continuous nights of horror films?
That's why I don't have a significant other at the moment.
Oh, maybe not 31.
I'm so sad and lonely. There we go.
God, stop.
Well, when you hear what I've been watching for the last 2 weeks, you'll see it's lucky that I'm still with somebody. But anyway, Nathan, have you got anything for us?
I don't have anything, but BTK said some really nice stuff about me on the message board, so I appreciate that, BTK.
Yeah, well, thank you, BTK.
Bloody Murder is not the worst movie ever made.
Oh.
There are a few that's worse than it.
Yeah.
Well, there are, definitely, I would agree with that, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure he'll be very, very happy with that. I actually helped BTK out by buying, I think it was a French, or was it an English a DVD copy of Bloody Murder? And I've sent it across to him, so hopefully he's got that by now. I've just got a couple of little bits. I won't read them all out, but there's from Jason Jarns, who says he loves the podcast, and he's actually sent me a link to to try and get an interview with the director of Bloodbeat, which is the obscure French
woman touching herself.
Yes, with a giant samurai killing people in Wisconsin. So who knows? Maybe. Well, thanks for that, Jason. And we might look at doing a Bloodbeat episode at some point soon. And also Chris Bennett. He basically says very simply, "I've had a really good time listening to the podcast. It's aces." So thank you, Chris, and thanks for everyone else who's written to us. Joseph, do you want to give us the the body count. Sorry, not the body count. Hysteria continues. Feedback. Email.
Yes, if you want to write in, our email address is the.hysteria.continues@gmail.com. We are on Twitter. That is twitter.com/THC_podcast. And you can look us up on Facebook. Just type in The Hysteria Continues, and you will find us.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks for the feedback again. And what we're going to do now, in time-honoured tradition, is having a look at some of our recently seen. So it's been a couple of weeks since we recorded. So how about you, Erik? What have you been watching?
Okay, well, my recently seen is your recently seen plus one. Exactly what you saw last week. I've seen the Halloween 2 Blu-ray finally arrived. And I was watching that along with the companion piece that comes with it. Remind me of what it's called.
Oh,
the film,
Terror in the Isles.
Terror in the Isles?
Yeah.
Terror in the Isles, that's it, yeah. I still think Terror in the Isles is a one-watch film, in my opinion. I would have much preferred a featurette of some kind on Halloween 2. But the film does look fantastic. There's one scene that's particularly horrible looking on Blu-ray, but the rest of the film is fantastic. And I'm hoping to go see it on the big screen in Dublin in 2 weeks tomorrow as part of the Dublin Horror-thon. And incidentally, the other recently seen is showing at the Horror-thon as well. It's the 1980 exploitation film, not really a horror or a slasher, but it's The Exterminator, which I saw for the first time during the week on Blu-ray. It's a vigilante movie, I suppose you'd call it. Not bad. It has that spectacular decapitation in the opening 5 minutes, and then it's pretty run-of-the-mill after that.
Cool.
Erik, are you taking your significant other to the Halloween 2 screening?
No.
Okay.
No. My significant other would not enjoy horror film festival.
Oh.
Well, mine doesn't either, but I kind of make him go.
I'd enjoy a Barbara Streisand retrospective with Hello Dolly as the finale.
Well, I'm
See,
taking...
to me, that's the equivalent of something horrible.
Yes, I would agree.
I'm taking my significant other to see Videodrome on the big screen.
Where's that on?
In Bristol. At the Watershed on the day before Halloween, so on Sunday the 30th. So anyone's in Bristol who fancies seeing David Cronenberg's Videodrome on the big screen, then
love that movie.
Get tickets. Yeah, well, so do I. So I don't know why they've chosen that one. That's where I saw Eyes Without a Face. And they seem to be running some quite interesting older films, like a Sunday lunchtime. So sadly, they haven't done any horror films over October, which you would have thought they might do. But they seem to be doing some quite interesting things. So yeah,
we've got some great retro screenings at the Horror-thon this year. We've got, along with the ones I mentioned, we've got Aliens because Michael Biehn is the guest of honor. We've got Troll 2. Blowout, the John Travolta, Brian De Palma movie. So lots to look forward to, and new stuff as well, of course. So looking forward to that.
I like Blowout.
So do I, yeah.
Good movie.
Is your significant other looking forward to seeing Videodrome?
Oh, yes.
On the big screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. A big fan of Debbie Harry, so yes, very much so. So, okay, well, excellent. And my patented excellent is back. My
patented T is back as well. And my...
and my patented toy sucks, but we won't go into that this week because that's just getting old, isn't it? A bit like cat flushing a toilet, which may or probably won't make an appearance. So
it'll come back the next episode.
Maybe.
Hopefully.
I've got the YouTube button. But okay, how about you, Joseph? What have you been watching?
Okay, well, I saw the found footage film called Home Movie. It stars Adrian Pasdar. He was in Near Dark. And it's basically about this couple, and they have 2 children, a little boy and a little girl. And, they got a video camera, and they kind of document everything because it's a new video camera, and they want to make home films. But basically, they don't really realize that their children are doing all these evil things. And it takes them kind of a while to actually come to the conclusion that something's going wrong with their children. And it's basically kind of a battle between using faith to rid the evil and using science to rid the evil. The wife is like a psychiatrist, so she's on the science side, and he's a preacher, so he's on the faith side. But it turns out that neither really are going to work, and these kids keep doing all kinds of evil stuff. And it's a pretty good found footage film. It takes a little while to get going, but once the kids start doing all these like crazy things, it ramps up, and it has a really disturbing ending. It's one of those movies you have to kind of pay attention to because they leave little clues here and there about where it's going to lead, and then it all pays off at the end. But yeah, I'd definitely recommend that.
Okay, all right, that sounds interesting. You were talking on Facebook about another film, weren't you? About
yes, I'm not going to mention that. Actually, Nathan's going to mention that one.
Okay.
We watched it again last night. But I also saw the 1975 made-for-TV film Satan's Triangle, which is basically about this boat that gets kind of capsized in the middle of the ocean, or no, it doesn't get capsized. I'm having a hard time remembering because the movie was kind of underwhelming. But basically, the devil gets on a boat, and you got to figure out who the devil is, and it's all told in flashback. And at the time, it was probably pretty scary. But I don't know, it just kind of underwhelmed me a little bit. But so that's really all I have to say about it.
What did you say the film was called, Joseph?
Satan's Triangle.
Oh yeah, I have seen it. Yeah.
It stars Kim Novak.
There's one great scene where you see somebody floating in midair and on the boat, and that's probably the highlight of the film.
Yeah, well, I like the ending. The ending was really creepy, but I don't know, it just didn't really go anywhere. And last night, we rewatched Rituals. Well, most of it. The disc messed up in the last 10 minutes, which really soured me, but I love it. Yeah, I love Rituals. I think it is the most underrated backwoods film ever.
Absolutely. No, it's a great film, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's a shame.
And another film I wanted to mention was a Swedish slasher film called Blood Runs Cold.
Oh yeah, I was going to ask you about that because I put trailer on my Facebook page about 7 months ago. So is it any good?
I watched it. It's a serious Cold Prey ripoff, but it was done on a $5,000 budget, and it looks fantastic. I mean, it looks like a high budget film, and it's extremely gory, and it's pretty tense and suspenseful throughout the the last 20 or so minutes. It's basically it kind of follows that Cold Prey model where it's a bunch of people out in the cold. They get bumped off one by one until there's only a final girl battling the killer, and it's like a big cat and mouse to this like snow set kind of cabin. I recommend it. I mean it's missing something, and I can't really figure out what it's missing, but overall, yeah, if you see it, give it a watch because it's really well made.
Okay, well, that sounds good. And was it in English? Was it filmed in English, or was it?
It's actually it's a Swedish film, but it's these Swedish people pretending to be Americans and not doing a very good job of it. You can pretty much hear their accents slipping out from time to time.
Well, I guess for $5,000, it's not. You're not going to get the caliber of say like Dana Kimmel or someone, are you?
No. Well, you can get her for like $1,000 probably, but we won't go there.
Cool. Okay. Well, how about you, Nathan? What have you been watching?
I've seen 3, I guess, that are worth mentioning. The first one is called Undocumented. It's about a film crew, like a amateur film crew, like these film students who want to document what it's like for a group of people from Mexico trying to cross the border illegally.
Okay. I've heard about that.
And they get a mule that's going to, take them over there. And, it's a really interesting movie because, basically what happens is they kind of get captured by these patriotic fanatics who hate illegal immigrants and anything they consider anti-American. So they, capture them and torture them. It's not really a torture movie, though. I don't think it should get lumped in with what people call torture porn because I think the movie actually has a good message to say. And I think it's interesting because, these psychotic extremists, they have this American film crew in their midst, and killing off these American students kind of goes against what they want to do because they're all pro-American, but can they really let them leave, now that they've captured them? So I think it's an interesting film when you watch it. It's got a lot of tense scenes, too. It's definitely worth checking out.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard bits about it. It's not done like a found footage movie.
No.
No. Okay. Cool.
No,
okay.
It's not.
And what else have you been watching?
The second one I watched is The Human Centipede Part 2.
Oh, did you watch that? Okay. Oh.
Yes, I watched it. I'm one of the ones that I liked the first Human Centipede. It's not anything I'd watch twice, but I liked it for one watch. I kind of liked the director. He could have gone all out and, made it like as gross and as much exploitation as possible, but he didn't. He actually seemed to take it seriously, and I thought it was an interesting route to go. Well, part 2, he does go the exploitation route. I mean, everything disgusting and gross that you thought about from the first film, it's here in the second one. Don't watch it if you're expecting any kind of story, because really all you're going to get is a guy who has seen the first Human Centipede and he wants to make his own, and a bunch of characters who he knocks out and drags to a warehouse to make his own Human Centipede. I mean, that's it. Most of the characters don't even get a line in the movie before they're knocked out. So, I mean, you don't really know any of them or, I guess, care. So, I don't know. I just felt like that was kind of a bad route to go. But I can't say I disliked it because, I mean, what exactly did I expect from the Human Centipede Part 2? I mean, I think you pretty much get what you expect. I mean, it's just a crazy, gross out, over-the-top, ridiculous film. I mean...
And was it uncut?
The one I saw was not uncut, but even that was insane. I mean, I think they said that there's 2 scenes that was cut out of it. One was a close-up of the sandpaper masturbation scene where he uses sandpaper.
Yeah.
I mean, it kind of shows like it, but you don't see it. You just see his face. It's more implied. And then the second is like a barbed wire rape scene where he wraps barbed wire around, his...
Winkle.
His genitals and rapes someone in the centipede. So that's cut out. That was cut out completely because I didn't see that at all. Thankfully. I mean, I don't really particularly like seeing rape scenes in movies anyway.
No, but it's because, obviously the controversy in the UK, it was banned and now it's being released, but cut, probably quite a lot of cuts, I think. And I imagine, is it banned in Ireland, Erik?
I'd imagine so as well, because UK and Ireland is kind of seen as one market, so I don't think
from the BBFC control both.
Well, right. No, we've got our own Irish censor board, but we're much more strict, so if it's banned by the BBFC, you can be damn sure it's banned over here as well. Yeah.
If you have a weak stomach, I probably wouldn't eat while watching it, especially during certain scenes.
Well, that's the thing. They couldn't have actually wanted for better publicity, could they, to have it banned and then unbanned?
Exactly.
It's a bit like...
that would be perfect.
Yeah, it's a bit like Serbian film, isn't it? I mean, everybody wanted to watch it because it was banned or was going to be cut very much. So, it just kind of goes to show that kind of banning things doesn't work, especially in this day and age with people like Joseph online. Then, anything's watchable.
Hey.
What?
I want to make it clear that I did pay for both Human Centipede and Undocumented. I got them on Comcast On Demand.
Okay, and you've got one more.
Yes, the last one Joe and I watched. It's called Megan is Missing. I will never, ever watch this movie again because it's way too unpleasant. It's very depressing. But I think it's an important film because, I mean, it goes to show you what could happen, to these young girls who meet a guy online and just agree to meet him. And then, that's pretty much what happens in this movie. She meets a guy online, and agrees to meet him, and then she disappears. And the movie's like a found footage style movie in that most of the movie's told through webcam chats and, video phones and all that. And it takes a little bit to get to when the girl actually goes missing. But once it gets to that, it's bad. And the last 20 minutes is probably some of the most gut-wrenching scenes I've ever seen on film. I mean, it's so hard to watch. I actually had to look away a few times.
Okay. Oh, that's.
And I know Joe saw it too.
Yeah.
Yes, it is without a doubt one of the most harrowing found footage films I've ever seen. I mean, the setup is. The acting is a little off. It kind of feels staged, but once they actually get into the meat of the story, it feels so real, and it's a really well-made movie. It's actually a really good movie, but it's not a pleasant movie. It's a cautionary tale that I think parents should really make their kids watch. I mean, even the last part, the really, really graphic and disturbing stuff, I really think kids should watch this and say, hey, don't fuck around on the internet and, go off meeting people you don't know, because, it's probably one of the most disturbing movies I've ever seen. It's really well made, but I don't know if I can recommend it or not, but I mean, there's that. There it is. I mean, take from that what you will.
Okay. Obviously not seen that, and I presume it's a kind of a new film, isn't it?
Yes, it is on. If you have Netflix, it is on Netflix. You can see that it's on watch instantly.
Okay. Well, I mean, we don't get obviously we don't have Netflix in the UK. We have something called Love Film, which is kind of a similar thing. Do you have that in Ireland, Eric?
We have no streaming facilities in Ireland yet, as at the moment. I'm afraid you have to actually walk to the video shop.
Right. Okay.
Sadly.
I want to say one more thing. These found footage movies like Megan is Missing and the Poughkeepsie Tapes, I think they're some of the scariest movies out there because the way they portray real life, like this stuff could really happen. I mean, Paranormal Activity has the jump scares. Yeah, that's one thing. But this is stuff that, could happen to your child. So I'm going to say one more time, if you have a kid, you should probably watch this and, school them on the dangers of the internet. So there you go.
Okay, right. Okay, one to watch or one not to, depending on how you kind
just go in with knowing that you're going to be having nightmares for the rest of your life.
Okay, right. Okay, well, thank you for those, guys. I'll just quickly recap what I've been watching. I did actually watch Halloween 2, the Blu-ray, because we talked about it last time, but I actually watched it all the way through. And, of course, fantastic movie, and it's never looked better. So I was really pleased about seeing that. The other thing did see was talking about the found footage movies, and obviously not a slash movie, is Grave Encounters, which is the ghost hunting found footage movie, which I wasn't that impressed with, to be honest. Quite enjoyed the first half an hour, three-quarters an hour of it, and then it just goes pretty stupid after that. Which is a shame because I heard some really good things about it, and the trailer, looked great. I think you, Joseph, you liked it a bit more, didn't you?
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. The setup and like the first hour is really good, but then they show way too much at the end. They kind of give away, what they blow their wad. I mean, they have this great build up, and then they just kind of bombard you with all these kind of images that you'd almost see in like a Rob Zombie movie. It just kind of kills it.
Yeah. So yeah. Okay. Well, I think it's about time to get onto our Giallo section. What do you reckon, guys?
Let's do it.
Oh,
that was my Italian accent, by the way.
Was it? Okay. Right.
I'm drinking my Powerade with my pinky extended because this is classy.
Well, I'm not going to play any Rene and Renata, who Eric might remember.
I do.
You do? Yes, I won't play any of that. But I will have this playing in the background a little bit more. This is from The Case of Scorpion's Tail. It's a little bit of scary Giallo music. Just turn this down a little bit. But what I'm going to do is just to give introduction, because a lot of people listening to this will know what a Giallo is, but also I think some people aren't familiar with the genre. So this is from a very good book available in most bookstores. It's called Teenage Wasteland, and it is. I'm just going to read a little bit about it. It's going to say. So I was going to turn this down a little bit more. It's Bruno Nicolai, and that's one of the great things actually about a lot of these giallos is they have fantastic soundtracks. Just a little bit of background. The giallo takes its name from a series of lurid thrillers with trademark yellow covers. Giallo means yellow in Italian, which first appeared in Italy in 1929. Typically Latin in nature, the giallo took the staid crime novel and spiced it up with doses of sex, glamour and violence, and great soundtracks. Unlike the American slash movie in the 1970s and 1980s, the protagonists of the giallo were rarely teenagers. Rather, these films were populated with young, successful 20 or 30-somethings who sported the latest fashions, thought nothing of jetting off to exotic destinations, and were partial of a tipple of J&B whiskey. Mostly eschewing the zany outfits of the crimi villains, and we'll talk about crimis a little bit in a moment, the giallo retained money or madness as a primary driving force for murder. However, the joy of many gialli are the outlandish and highly improbable plot twists. The giallo, which increasingly mixed the horror and thriller genres to great effect, also differed from the later slasher movies by placing much emphasis on detective work to uncover the identity of the killer, either by the police or the protagonists themselves. Now, a little bit more about the giallo. The giallo was actually came from. It was based in the same as the crimi movies from Germany. Now, those are even less known. Krimis were based on the writings of Edgar Wallace and his son, Brian Edgar Wallace, who was an English writer who wrote quite early in the 20th century. And he also wrote King Kong, the original King Kong, the screenplay for that, I believe. And he wrote basically very outlandish crime novels. They became very, very popular in Germany. They were banned by the Nazis, but after the Second World War, there was a series of Krimi films in the 1950s and 1960s. And what they had were very outlandish villains who were dressed as things like monks in red robes with whips, even a gorilla in one thing, people with monster masks with gold spangly gloves, who basically bumped off the cast one by one. So taking its lead from like and then there were one, and all of those kind of other things. And I said in the book is the slasher movie didn't start with Halloween. It had been going for a long, long time before that in various different guises before it crystallised into Halloween. Now, the giallo was, again, as I said, is a popular sort of pulp fiction books in Italy from 1929, which again took the lead from Edgar Wallace. They were turned into a series of films, not really connected, but just by the idea of basically their thriller films. Started probably in the early 60s with Mario Bava's The Girl Who Knew Too Much in 1963. What we're going to do is we're going to do our top three gialli, and also we're going to talk later in depth about Deep Red and Eyeball. But we're just going to talk a little bit between us about what a giallo means to us. In case you as already said, for me, the giallo is basically a slasher movie. The difference for me between the American slasher movies and the Italian slasher movies, the giallo, is a few differences. Is both of them put emphasis on the murders. They are the main set pieces. But what is different with them is that you tend to have not a teenage range of victims. They're probably made for 20, 30-something audience. And much emphasis is based on the investigation into uncovering who the killer is. And the same with the Krimis as well. That was very much the same. And you would have the police involved. Whereas, in fact, most American slasher movies, the police are barely involved, if involved at all, and the mystery element is usually underplayed, apart from the grand unmasking at the end. So it's basically reducing the idea to its bare minimum. And obviously with a giallo, you have the black gloves, the black leather gloves, the fedora, and the mysterious killer, who may be a man or a woman, but is usually unmasked at the end. So, guys, what does the giallo mean to you? Erik, do you want to start?
Yeah, well, I agree with you that they are sort of prototype slashers, but they are quite different to the American ones that we're familiar with from the early 80s, in that they play more as mysteries and thrillers rather than as horror films, with occasional exceptions. They're often laced with sort of what the fuck moments, which we discussed in our very first show. And you can often be completely bamboozled until the very end of the film when things are kind of wrapped up. And you can often, like I often feel when I'm watching a giallo, that there could be...
Sorry, I was just playing a little bit behind you.
Just thinking I could hear these funny voices in the background.
This is the Red Queen in my head kill 7 times. Sorry,
I was just going to say that often you can feel that there has to be a supernatural element to this giallo. There's no other way to explain what's going on, but they'll often wrap things up in a very Scooby-Doo kind of way to try and make it sound plausible. And there's always in every giallo, there's always one character who says, "I know who the killer is, but I won't tell you over the phone. Meet me at XYZ in half an hour and I'll tell you." And of course that person gets killed off. But I do think that, and there's so many of them to discuss. The giallo are essentially Agatha Christie, I suppose, ish films. They'd be on a par with maybe slasher films like which ones am I thinking of? Something like Terrorize would be kind of giallo-ish. It's kind of outlandish, leaves the killer's identity as a mystery. But I still think they are quite different. As you said, they concentrate more on sort of middle-aged adults rather than horny teenagers in a summer camp. So they are quite different, and yeah.
Great. Okay. Well, we're going to be talking about a couple of them in more depth, or a few of them actually, our top threes shortly. How about you, Nathan? What are your thoughts?
The same as both of your guys' thoughts.
Okay. Right.
I don't really have a lot to add because I agree with everything that y'all said. I mean, they're not like Friday the 13th movies. I mean, they're obviously different. And I do think it's funny what Erik said, because there's always a character who figures it out early and then they die. I mean, but what's funny to me is it's like Erik said, they'll never tell them over the phone or anything. I mean, if it was me, the second I found out who the killer was, I'd be calling everybody I know. But
I know,
Meet me in a park at midnight, and I'll tell you.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I'll cut your throat. Yes. How about you, Joseph? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think we can all agree that the Giallo, I mean, they're not very structured films. They're more about color and representation and showing flashy images on the screen. I think they put more emphasis on style over substance. It's basically police procedurals with wacky mysteries going on, some outlandish death scenes. It has more of an ethereal tone, whereas slasher films are kind of, upbeat and peppy. These are more almost like you're filming a slasher film while on LSD. That's what I've always thought of as Giallo. But I love the genre. I'm not as well versed on it as I am with slasher films, but I'm trying to be. But that's what I think when I look at a Giallo.
Cool. Okay. Well, shall we talk about our top threes? Because then we can talk a little bit more about the specifics of the Giallo and why we like them or why we don't like them. Erik, do you want to go with your number 3 first?
Okay, my number 3 is from 1972. It's a film by Tonino Valeri, and it's called My Dear Killer. It's kind of set in, it has a rural backdrop, kind of similar to Lucio Fulci's Don't Torture a Duckling. And it kind of has an otherworldly feel because it's a really sort of poor rural area, and there's characters in it who live in what look like cow sheds. It's quite a very different world to what you see in a Giallo and maybe a Dario Argento one, where it's like set in a fashion house or something. It starts off a tad comically with the guy being decapitated by what I believe is called a dredger. It's kind of a crane with a claw device at the end. This guy gets it clamp onto his head. He's lifted off the ground with his legs dangling furiously, and it's kind of silly to look at, to be honest. The police then investigate what he was doing there, why he was killed, and what it has to do with that recent-ish death of a young girl and her father, who were left to starve in this, what looked like a pretty easily escapable shack in the middle of nowhere. This film stars George Hilton, and I'm sure his name is going to crop up quite a lot in our discussion, because he was the male version of Edwige Fenech, in that he was in probably every second Giallo there was in Italy in the 70s. This was passed uncut by the BBFC a year ago for a shameless DVD release, and I'm really surprised at that, because there's one sequence in it where you get full frontal nudity from a girl who has to be under 10 years of age, which is, I would consider, a big no-no in this very, very PC day and age. There's also loads of violence in it as well. There's a spectacular death with a circular saw that features in a lot of the cover artwork that is very, very, I suppose, 80s, you could call it. It predates the sort of gore era of slasher films. And I suppose of the 3 on my list, this is the closest to the American slasher film. It's My Dear Killer from 1972.
Great. Okay, and it's got a great scene, isn't it, with Marissa Mel? I think it is. We're being killed with a drill. That's the one, isn't it?
No, that's the circular saw one, I think. Is
it the circular saw? Sorry, no, you're right. Yeah.
That's the one they put on the cover of the DVD release.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, great choice. Thank you, Erik. How about you, Joseph? What's your number 3?
Well, my number 3 is also from 1972. It's So Sweet, So Dead, also known as The Slasher as the Sex Maniac. And it stars Farley Granger as a detective. He's investigating a series of murders with unfaithful wives. They're the targets. Now, what I love about this movie, aside from its sex noise soundtrack, is it's got like a mean streak running through it. The killer, of course, takes snapshots of his victims to leave as evidence of their infidelity. So on top of carving them up, he exposes them to the world before killing them. And in keeping with the tone of the film, the ending is both cruel and a sensible conclusion. It's probably one of the only giallo out there that ends on such a depressing note. I mean, it doesn't cheat, so I mean it ends how it should, in keeping with the storyline. But yeah, that's my number 3.
Great. Okay. Yeah, fantastic. Well,
you've seen that one, haven't you, Justin?
I have. Yes. Yeah. No, it's yeah, they're all really good choices so far. How about you, Erik? Have you seen that one?
I have, yeah. Can't remember a huge amount about it, to be honest.
Okay. Well, I say some of the gialli are kind of quite well known outside of Italy. That one, So Sweet, So Dead, was actually released in America under the title, as you said, The Slasher Sex Maniac, which I've got the one sheet for, which is fantastic. But it's also re-released as Penetration, which was a hardcore, loads of hardcore inserts into it. So quite what they would have thought when the Raincoat Brigade went in to watch that, I don't know, but apparently
yes, and when they released it as Penetration, Farley Granger ended up suing them to make it stop because he didn't want to be associated with pornography.
Porno.
That's what I'd read. Anyway.
I can imagine, because they'd be Farley Granger was doing that, and then he's suddenly in the film with lots of hefty boomerangs, so kind of being very nice. Okay, how about you, Nathan? What's your number 3?
Well, I was about to change my number 3 at the last minute, but since I don't know what yours are, Justin, I'm afraid I might pick one that you've picked. So I'm going to go with my original one.
Mine are the same as we did earlier. Well, I said earlier, but if you mess it up, I'll put my black leather gloves on and head over to Tennessee. But apart from that, no, I'll choose something else. So don't worry about it.
Oh, well, I don't think you'd have picked this one anyway, because a lot of people, it's more of an underrated one. It's Argento's The Bird with the Crystal.
Okay.
Well, how do you pronounce that last word?
Plumage.
Plumage.
Yeah.
Plumage. Yes.
Cleavage.
This is a milestone for me because I think it surpassed Opera as my favorite Argento film. Because I love the story behind it. I actually watched it last night.
Yeah.
It's basically about a man who witnesses a woman being attacked late one night, and she gets stabbed by someone, wearing the classic, Giallo killer's attire, the fedora and black gloves and everything. And, basically the mystery is, who he is and why he attacked her. And, people start dying, your typical Giallo stuff. But I love the finale, like when we find out who the killer was, because I totally didn't get it. I mean, I didn't guess it right. And usually I'm good at guessing the killers in these movies, but I couldn't guess it correctly. And there's also a really good scene where Susie Kendall is alone in her apartment, and the killer's menacing her through the door of her apartment, which is a really good scene as well. So even though I love Opera, this one I think is just beat it for my favorite Argento film.
Okay, yeah, well, excellent. Well, I think because we had Deep Red already on here, I think we kind of avoided more Argento. But having said that, I think it's really good that that film was on here. So
yeah,
thank you, Nathan,
I have to say my top 3 would have been all Argento, except that because I was thinking Deep Red, I said I'll skip Argento for the top 3.
Yeah,
but I do think Birds of Crystal Plumage is superb.
Yes. Yes. Well, no, thank you. I mean, it probably wouldn't have been right not to have it. So I think it's really good that we do. So no, thank you. Just trying to see what my number 3 is, if I can remember, is Death Walks at Midnight from 1972, Luciano Accoli, which is kind of a bit of a minor giallo, really, but I was kind of looking for films that others hadn't chosen. And the reason I chose this, actually, it's not the best giallo by any stretch, but it's a very fun one, and it's got a great... it's basically one of those kind of batshit giallos, and one of the joys of the giallo is sometimes it goes beyond what you imagine it will do. And some of them are very, very campy now, obviously. And this is one of them. It's got Susan Scott. Nieves Navarro she's a Spanish actress, and that's her original name, Susan Scott. And back in the 70s, quite often they would give actors and actresses a kind of anglicised name, a bit like George Hilton, who's actually, I think he's Bolivian or somewhere in South America, I think, or Central America. But the reason I love this is actually the premise, which is a fashion model is given a experimental hallucinatory drug like LSD, and while she's tripping out and they're recording her wigging out, basically, she sees in the across from her a girl being killed in the building opposite by a killer with massive bug sort of sunglasses and a kind of a steel claw with spikes on it. And she then has to try and convince people that she actually saw that. So that's one of the reasons I really, really like it. It wasn't the only film that Coley did, or Susan Scott did. She also did Death Walks in High Heels, Death Carries a Cane, and So Sweet, So Dead. So and again, actually, one of the joys of the giallo are their fantastic names, which quite often their titles are just completely translated from the Italian, and that's why they have such kind of playful titles. So that's my number 3. So I think it's time to go on to number 2, and we won't have a cat flushing a toilet, which some of you will be pleased to hear, and some of you will be heartbroken, I know. But Erik, what's your number 2?
Well, my number 2 is very classy, actually, and it probably doesn't deserve having a cat flushing a toilet as an intro. It's Short Night of the Glass Dolls, which is an Aldo Lado movie from 1971. The story is that there's a reporter played by Jean Sorel who's found apparently dead in Prague, but we find out that his brain is still active and is totally aware of his surroundings. However, to the medical experts, he appears to be dead. So he's been administered a drug, much like Bill Pullman's character in Serpent of the Rainbow. So the film is told a flashback revealing how things led to this, mainly revolving around his investigations into his girlfriend's sudden disappearance, played by Barbara Bach. And it leads to quite a chilling and downbeat conclusion that would be worthy of David Fincher. It's really, really a non-cheesy and quite a serious film, apart from one awful folk song interlude sort of 3/4 away through the film, and has a very somber atmosphere. And it has quite a sort of anti-establishment feel, because the climax culminates in a scene that would later be taken to surreal extremes in Brian Yuzna's Society. It has kind of an orgy involving lots of sort of elderly people that not even I would find interesting. But it is quite an interesting hippies versus establishment giallo. What did you say, Joseph?
So they must be old.
Sorry?
They must be old.
They are. I mean, we're talking people in their 70s here, okay. So it's quite a sight, believe me. But the film is somber, I suppose, is the atmosphere you would describe for Short Night of the Glass Dolls. It's not a fun giallo, but it's certainly very interesting, very good.
Okay, no, I really like that film, actually. It's got that 70s paranoia thing about it, isn't it?
Indeed, yeah.
A bit like the perfume of the woman or Lady in Black, that whole kind of thing. And it's great. It's a fantastic ending as well.
I love the ending to that film, yeah.
And Jean Sorel is kind of a very handsome leading man who is in a lot of films. Many of them are Carol Baker, who's a kind of another American actress who was kind of a bit of the alternative queen of the giallo. So, brilliant. Okay, thank you for that. How about you, Joseph? What's your number 2?
Well, my number 2 is actually an Argento film. It's his classic Tenebrae. This is a film that's earned its accolades and then some. It's got a series of beautiful cinematic murders. The dismembered arm painting the wall sequence is truly a standout. It's got a complicated plot and a cast of well-knowns in the lead role, John Saxon probably being the most famous. But it's Argento's directorial canvas that really shines. And watching a film like Tenebrae, you see how he was one of the greats of the genre who, unfortunately kind of fell out of touch with the style that made him such an iconic director. But I'm not going to nitpick his latter output. The ending and revelation of the killer is also worth mentioning, as it's kind of one of a kind for the time frame. It's a motive that's been mocked a lot in recent years, but for stylistic murders, you can't really go wrong with Tenebrae. It's one of the more graphic giallos out there.
Yeah, well, no, great.
And that's my number 2.
Thank you, Joseph. It's also one of the giallos that ended up on the video nasty list in YouTube.
Indeed, yeah. Mainly for that scene where that woman gets her hand chopped off and she sprays blood all over her nice white kitchen.
Yeah, that's the scene. That's the standout scene, I believe.
Yeah, yeah. No,
I quite like the idea. The sort of the thesis of Tenebrae is that the author who immerses himself in the macabre will end up a psychopath. So I think we should all steer clear of Justin.
How do you know it hasn't already happened? So, I know. But yeah, no, Tenebrae is a great film.
Oh, sorry, spoiler alert for what I just said. Oops.
Okay.
Well, that's from '82. You should have seen it by now. If you're listening to a giallo episode, you should have seen it by now.
Yeah, fair enough. And as playing in the background is actually the soundtrack to one of the soundtracks to Tenebrae. So,
yeah, featured in my top 3 of soundtracks when we did them a few
It's very funky.
ago. Yeah,
very funky.
Very funky. How about you, Nathan? What's your number 2?
My number 2 is Lamberto Bava's A Blade in the Dark.
Okay.
Always been a huge fan of this movie. And one thing to me about giallos is I don't find many of them to be very rewatchable. Like, actually, I forget most of them. So, I mean, I probably could go back and watch them a year later and forget everything about it, from the previous time I saw it. But something about A Blade in the Dark always stuck with me, and I can rewatch it anytime. Your basic plot is composer for a horror film goes to stay at this kind of creepy villa, and I guess it's supposed to inspire him when he's coming up with the score for this horror film. But then he ends up stumbling upon the secret of the villa's previous owner, and people around him start getting killed off in pretty gory ways. One of the standout scenes for me in that movie is the bathroom death, where one of the girls gets killed in the bathroom. It's pretty creepy, especially when the killer stabs her hand and you see her trying to pull her hand through the blade. That's a pretty wild scene. And also, I like the ending because even though the killer in this one's kind of easy to figure out, it actually does have one very unexpected scene at the end that I really didn't see coming. Spoiler alert. And that's the fact that the main guy's girlfriend, who you're almost certain he's going to rescue, gets killed before he gets a chance to find her and rescue her. So I thought that was an interesting route to go, because usually the woman always gets rescued.
Yeah. Okay. Well, no, excellent. I'm being attacked by cats at the moment, so I'm trying to push off.
They're probably mad that you didn't flush the toilet.
Sorry.
The cats are probably mad that you didn't flush the toilet.
Well, I know.
Is it Gilbert?
No, it's actually Seabiscuit. She's being very affectionate. So
the hair one, the one that likes hair.
Yes, the one that licking hair. But yeah, so that's why I'm a little bit distracted. She's looking a bit pissed off now that I'm not playing with her. But well, thanks for that, Nathan. I shall do my number 2, which is going back to almost the beginnings of the giallo, which is Mario Bava's Blood and Black Lace. And I said before, he kind of started the giallo as a cinematic trend, really, with The Girl Who Knew Too Much in 1963. But it was a film that he followed it up in 1964, was Blood and Black Lace, not to be confused with Blood and Lace, which is the 1971, I think it is, American proto-slasher. But what this does, and this is what was obviously a huge influence on Dario Argento, was mixing basic sex and violence, and it has a story, or an idea of a story, that's been used in many giallo since, which is the idea of a killer or killers stalking a fashion house. So what you have is a roster or a rota of beautiful women being attacked and killed by a masked lunatic, and in this case it's a masked lunatic in a fedora hat, but also has a white kind of mask for a face. It's like a stretched over his or her face, and so it completely obliterates their features. And John Carpenter admitted that it was actually an influence on the mask or for Halloween for Michael Myers. So again, it goes to show how these films actually influenced the slasher movie later on. So and also the other thing that kind of influenced Dario Argento was the colour, because the colour was incredible. The Girl Who Knew Too Much was black and white. beautifully shot, like all Mario Bavo's films were. But Blood and Black Lace was shot in Technicolor, and with lots of reds and blues and greens. It gives it kind of an otherworldly feel. It's fantastic film. It's not my number one, it's my number two. So Eric, should we go on to your number one?
Okay, well, my number one would in reality be Deep Red, but we're discussing that in depth later. So my number one for now is Lizard in a Woman's Skin, which is Lucio Fulci's giallo from 1971. It stars Florinda Balkan as a woman who has this dream that she murders her sexy lesbian next-door neighbour, who's played by Anita Strindberg. So when she wakes up the next morning, she discovers that her neighbour is actually dead, and she's actually been murdered. So she goes on this quest to unravel the mystery. Now, I think I said on an earlier podcast, possibly very early in our run of podcasts, that Black Swan owed a huge debt to films like Lizard in a Woman's Skin and like The Perfume of the Lady in Black and Footprints on the Moon. It's got these psychedelic dream sequences that are incredibly shot sequences. There's one that's quite cheesy. It involves this sort of very fake-looking giant goose chasing Florinda Balkan. But there's others like the infamous scene with the gutted Labradors in some kind of strange laboratory that caused a lot of grief for Fulci. In fact, I think it's Carlo Rambaldi did the effects, and he had to actually bring the props to the courts in Italy to prove that they didn't actually kill dogs, in the process of making the movie. You have these other images like this hippie couple with zombie-like eyes, and there's a naked orgy in the corridor of a train. There's some really, really incredible images, but it's never too convoluted. It's never so out there that you can't follow it. And it's certainly proof that Fulci was at one time in his life a great artist. Now, I still consider his early 80s gory stuff like The Beyond, City of the Living Dead and that as really, really good. I think Zombie Flesh Eaters is the one sort of trashy movie in his canon from that era. I know he kind of lost it in later in his career, but that's the same of anyone. I mean, John Carpenter's lost it, Argento lost it. So, I mean, we have to forgive him for that. And I mean, he made two other brilliant gialli that I can name, Don't Torture a Duckling and The Psychic, which I was fortunate to see on the big screen a few years ago at the Horror-thon that I was mentioning earlier. And the title of the film, A Lizard in a Woman's Skin, actually is not that cryptic. It actually has relevance to the plot, which I won't mention because it does give the ending away. But, I mean, if you like lesbians, if you like murders, if you like surreal imagery, then this is a good film to watch. I mean, you don't have to be a giallo expert to sort of get the film at all. I think it's kind of a good entry-level giallo, Lizard in a Woman's Skin. Have you seen it, Justin? I assume you have.
I've watched it fairly recently, actually. It's, I really like it. I mean, it's got a real kind of warped idea of what, because it's set in London, isn't it? And swinging, late 60s, early 70s, and it's got like the killer hippies, and basically this kind of like just a lot of the. There's quite a few Italian films, giallos from around this time, had this idea of London as being very swinging and very decadent, and it's got the kind of comedy hippie smack users with the big black bags under their eyes and killer hippies chasing people across rooftops and stuff like that, which is really good. I'm trying to actually play in the background some music from the film, but it's being either I've got one of the here we go. Oh, it's one of the you can hear it's the spooky bits, because this is the thing with when you get the soundtracks, you've got like the upbeat kind of poppy bits, the pop bits, or then you have the kind of these kind of bits, which is I believe it's Ennio Morricone's soundtrack to A Lizard in a Woman's Skin, and obviously these are the bits used in the kind of scary moments, I kind of guess. So that's why you couldn't hear it. But yeah, it's great. How about you, Joseph and Nathan? Have you seen it?
I have not.
Okay, it's one worth seeing. Yeah, it's worth seeing. It's definitely worth seeing. There's a really good, because I've got I think it's a Shriek Show version of it that they put it out. But I bought it quite a while back, and I got the 2-disc version. There's actually a better version they brought out since, which has got, I believe it's got like a much better print, because Fulci was actually taken to court because they couldn't believe that there's a scene in it with a split dog in half wasn't real. And actually, we'll probably talk a little bit about this in Deep Red. And the Italians had a bit of a habit for real sort of cruelty, animal cruelty in films, which is something I really hate. But the irony actually was with this was Lucio Fulci wasn't. It was actually Carlo Rambaldi, I think that's his name. I think he actually did E.T. And I think he started on films like this, and it was a special effects thing. They didn't harm any dogs and all of it, but he had to go to court to prove that he hadn't harmed the dogs. So great choice. I'm kind of losing track actually, and we're number ones, aren't we now? So did you want to say anything more about that, Erik?
Sorry?
Did you want to say anything more about that one?
No, I'm finished now.
Okay, well, how about you, Joseph? What's your number one?
Well, my number one is Giuseppe, or Pupi, rather, Avati's The House of the Laughing Windows, which centers around an art restoration expert whose attempts to restore a fresco depicting the murder of St. Sebastian is met with essentially a lot of strange shit. Sinister phone calls telling him to skip town, locals with secrets they simply will not tell, and even a murder or two. Naturally, while The House with the Laughing Windows is not a typical giallo, it adheres to the constraints of the genre while sidestepping into other gothic territories. We have the atypical outsider who witnesses a murder, flashy images of blades and flesh, and Avati's direction is as sure-footed as any Argento giallo, in my opinion. And that final scene is really bone-chilling if you've seen the film.
I mean, it's one of my favourite gialli, but it's kind of very, like you say, it's very different, isn't it? It's a very different...
it's really otherworldly. I don't know if you can really even classify it as a giallo. I mean, it's got those qualities, but it's a little something else, I think. But that's my number one.
Great. Okay.
It's got a scary opening theme song.
What? Yeah. No,
that's it.
This one, yeah. Oh, look at that. How's that? You know, as you can see, I'm sort of fiddling around in the background. As you can tell.
You should work for BBC Radio 1.
Do you think so? I'd be better than Chris Moyles, I'm sure.
I do. I mean, I love House with Laughing Windows. It kind of reminds me of The Wicker Man in that it has this out-of-towner coming and all the locals seem to be conspiring against him. It just has this fantastic sort of semi-supernatural feel to it, and a fantastic punchline.
Definitely.
Yeah, the punchline to it's fantastic.
Beach. And the opening scenes, like the opening song and the guy, talking about how the colors, like slip them into darkness or something like that. That was like a really scary, just even watching that before you even get into the movie.
That kind of reminds me of when he plays back the reel to reel with those voices on it. I think Session 9 probably borrowed that with the Simon tapes, the session tapes, because they kind of have that. They use noise and voices to kind of heighten the atmosphere. They're similar. They remind me of one another.
Yeah, I mean, I love that film because it's kind of it's Pupi Avati, if that's how you say his name. But I mean, he did the Arcane Enchanter. Have you seen that, Joseph?
I'm sorry, what was it called?
It's called the Arcane Enchanter.
No, I haven't seen that one.
It's kind of a follow-up or kind of remake of The House of the Laughing Windows. It's not really. It's actually set in something like the 17th century, 18th century, so it's kind of different in some ways. But it's a really, really good film. It's kind of very disturbing, but quite magical. It's definitely worth a look. If you've not seen it, I would suggest getting hold of that.
I will purchase that.
Yes, we should look for it. So great. Well, lots of good ones. And if you're listening to this, we might do actually, I think. After we've done this, if we decide, if you've not seen any gialli, maybe we should just have a quick chat after we've gone through Nathan and my number ones, what we believe would be a good gateway giallo to come into if you're not familiar with the genre. But before we do, Nathan, what's your number one?
My number one is Torso from Sergio Martino. I don't think there's any movie out there that's going to top Torso as far as my number one choice. I mean, it's the perfect giallo to me. And basically it's about a serial killer who's stalking this college or this school and killing off people. And one girl and her friends decide to go to this like a villa in the country, which turns out to be a huge mistake. The killer just follows them out there, and I really like it. I really like the beginning scenes where the killer's stalking the girls at the school, especially the scene where the one girl who's kind of drugged out walks through that swamp area, and the killer's like in the shadows around the trees. That's a really good scene. And also like the ending scenes, and I've discussed them before in a previous podcast, but the scene where the heroine is trying to get the key out of the door, that's like a really, really scary scene. And also the scene where the bodies are being hacked up with a saw, and one of the characters is off to the side, like trying to hide and trying to cover her ears because she could still hear the bones being like sawed up. So that's a really good scene too. Great movie.
It's a brilliant movie, isn't it? And it's very it played on American screens, especially on drive-in screens in the 70s, and I think it probably had an impact, I imagine, on John Carpenter and people who were making slasher movies later in the 70s, because it has far more of a kind of a slasher movie film as we know them, a bit like Mario Bava's A Bay of Blood or Twitch of the Death Nerve, which is one we haven't talked about, but we have talked about it before, which has got very, very much nods towards the later films, with an idea of having a kind of a body count. And certainly in Torso, with that scene, Nathan, you're talking about the girl being chased through the woods by a masked killer, very much foreshadows something like the Friday the 13th movies, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. You're right.
Yeah. Okay, what about you guys, Eric? What do you reckon?
I love Torso, I have to say, and it would have made my top 3, except I kind of predicted that somebody else would have picked it. I think that, the whole sequence where Susie Kendall is trying to disguise the fact that she's in the house, and so she rearranges the room to make it look like nobody's there. Am I mistaken, or is that done exactly the same in Switchblade Romance? Doesn't she do that? She tries to make it look like she's not in the room? Or am I mistaken?
No, she does. She does. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
But actually, in Eyeball, there's a sequence, isn't there, at the end of Eyeball, with the key playing on that kind of thing, if you remember.
Yes.
There is. You're right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, fantastic.
Torso is absolutely terrific. I think Sergio Martino is a terrific director. I can't understand why he's not in my top 3, because he's made some really terrific ones, but I definitely tell people to seek them out.
Great. Well, that's a good... Well, actually, seguing on from that nicely is my number 1, which is another Sergio Martino movie. It's actually his first giallo, which is The Strange Vice of Mrs. Ward, or as it was known in America as Next. And it was kind of like a battle cry, I kind of guessed. One is, just like the slasher movies in the early 80s, in the early 70s, what you had were many, many giallo coming out very, very quickly in the wake of the success of Dario Argento's The Bird with the Crystal Plumage. And one of the first out the door, it was actually made around about the same time, was The Strange Vice of Mrs. Ward. And it's a kind of typical giallo in lots of ways. It has Edwige Fenech and George Hilton, and it's kind of like a love triangle or a love quadrangle, maybe even, with Edwige Fenech, who is a housewife who has a fear of blood, and she's being romanced by a psychotic cult leader, and then an Irish playboy played by George Hilton, and then she has her husband who is a bureaucrat, and it's set in Vienna, and there happens to be a razor-wielding killer clad in leather killing buxom blondes and other ladies in Vienna. So in this background you have this sexual politics and all these things happening, and it's Edwige Fenech is a kind of basically very good at being menaced by the killer, and she does lots of running away, and there's some great scenes. Another really good scene actually with a key or a lock, and one of the obsessions with the giallo was this whole idea of jet set lifestyles, and in this what she does, she gets away with George Hilton. There's lots of shots of her being driven around the countryside, either on motorbikes or in sports cars, and they end up in Spain, a bit like with Eyeball coming up shortly, and she's menaced by the killer with a harpoon gun. So lots of fun, quite campy, but it's topped up with a very, very good twist. So presumably you've all seen that, have you?
Yes, yeah, great film.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that ending. It's really, really clever, I suppose you'd call it. And that scene where she's menaced with a harpoon gun and shot in Stitches, a favorite holiday destination of mine, which also features in Eyeball.
Okay. Because I've never been to Stitches. Is it Stitches or Stitches?
Stitches, and there's actually a horror and science fiction festival going on there at the moment as we speak. It's every year in October.
Yeah. I'd love to go there some point. So hopefully, we might get invited one year. We could go there as a whole podcast, couldn't we? That'd
yes,
be good. That's what we want to do. Okay.
Alan Jones is there as we speak.
Okay.
Yes, he's tweeting from Stitches at the film festival.
Right. Excellent. Okay. Well, that's our top 3. But what would you say to somebody who doesn't really know giallo very well? What would you say is a good one to go in on?
I would recommend Tenebrae.
Okay.
Tenebrae would be a good starting point, or Blade in the Dark, actually.
Because it's very similar to a slasher movie, isn't it? It's got that.
Yeah.
Well, the vintage is the same, isn't it? 82. So yeah, I think that'd be a good choice.
Well, preempting what we're about to discuss, I would say Deep Red, or possibly Torso, as Nathan was discussing. I think it's closer to a slasher film, so it might be a good entry point.
Cool. Okay. Brilliant. Well, hopefully that's given a good overview of the giallo. And what would be good, actually, if you enjoy the genre, why don't you tell us what would be your top 3? And then we can read them out on the show next week or in the following weeks. I think, without further ado, shall we go to our first film of the double feature? Because we're already at about an hour and a half, so I think we're going to be going to quite an epic sort of thing. I'm fiddling around furiously with lots of different things in front of me, which sounds very rude, but I don't mean it to. But what we're going to do is, I think
sounds sexy, Justin.
Sexy, yeah. Well, just like a giallo. I'm sitting here drinking J&B whiskey, smoking a cigar in head to toe in polyester, just about to jet off to Barcelona. So
Justin Travolta.
Exactly. But what we're going to do is the first of our giallo double bill is the wonderful cheesy Eyeball. To give you a taster of it, here's the American trailer.
Eyeball. Don't blink. Don't turn around. Don't even move. Now you'll witness the most blinding horror ever seen. How far can you go before your eyes leave your body? Eyeball.
Right, that was the American trailer for Eyeball from 1975, Umberto Lenzi's last giallo. A ragtag group of American tourists is on a coach tour of Spain. During a visit to the Ramblas in Barcelona, a local girl is attacked by an unseen assailant and is discovered by the tour party with one of her eyes gouged out. Pretty soon other women, including some of those on the tour, are murdered in the same gruesome fashion by someone in the red rain slicker. The same red rain slicker that was given to all the holidaymakers. Soon they are all under suspicion by the police, yet the coach tour continues regardless. Can the survivors piece together the clues and finger the killer before it's too late? Now, Eyeball was, as I said, Umberto Lenzi's last giallo. He'd already directed quite a few of them. In fact, he directed Orgasmo with Carol Baker, who was in Baby Doll in the 50s. She's one of the kind of American actors and actresses who went to Europe when their kind of career kind of nosedived in the States. He directed that in 1969, so it was about the same time as Dario Argento was doing The Bird of the Crystal Plumage. Also, Carol Baker films, So Sweet, So Perverse. A Quiet Place to Kill, which is the kind of a game with Carol Baker. The Killer Hippie film, An Ideal Place to Kill. Also, just before this, he did Seven Bloodstained Orchids, which is like a Crimi giallo hybrid. And he's reunited with Carol Baker in 72 as well with Knife of Ice. And the film he made just before this was with Susie Kendall, who was in the Bird of Crystal Plumage, which is a very strange Spasmo. Now, Now, Eyeball is one of my favourite gialli. It's also probably one of the worst gialli there is. I mean, it's really bottom of the barrel in a lot of ways, but actually makes it so damn entertaining. It's very, very cheesy. I mean, if you haven't seen it and you enjoy cheesy films, then watch it. If you're looking for a good giallo, probably avoid this for a while. This is very much the cheesier end of the scale. Whether or not it's tongue-in-cheek, I don't know. I don't know if Umberto Lenzi was, thought he was making a good film. It's just kind of patently ridiculous. You have this killer attacking all these people on this coach, not literally on the coach, but visiting all these places, and with a fantastic soundtrack as well, which we'll play a little bit at the end of the podcast. I might play a little bit in a moment as well. And there's all these murders, but very few of the people actually leave the coach tour, which is hilarious in itself. It's got some amazing dialogue, which I'll play a little bit of later, and one of the most amazing endings that I've ever seen. So how about you guys? What do you reckon? Joseph? Hello, Joseph? You there?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I like Eyeball quite a bit. It's certainly silly and overly convoluted, but I suppose that's part of its charm. Yeah, I love how these group of people, they get trapped in this like never-ending vacation from hell by this killer whose motive pretty much hinges entirely on the color of a person's eyeball. It's really silly. One of my favorite scenes was the flamenco. It segues into this image of a naked woman in the shower, and then there's the scene where the woman is attacked, and then she falls into the swimming pool. And then after the killer is long gone, she finally screams out, "Please, I don't want to die." It really made me laugh out loud. I kind of got lost with the story near the end, and I couldn't really keep up with who was who because everyone kind of looked alike. So by the time the killer was revealed in that really completely ridiculous unmasking, I kind of stopped caring about the specifics and just kind of went with it. But yeah, Eyeball's a smorgasbord of cheese, and that's pretty much quite enough for me, I'd say.
Okay, well, thank you, Joseph. How about you, Nathan?
I'm 50-50 on Eyeball, I think. I love all the death scenes and all the scenes where the killer attacks, and I love, obviously, the cheesy reveal. And I love the finale in that castle. But for some reason, when it's just the characters, like, talking amongst themselves, I don't know. I wasn't that interested in what they had to say or any of it. I do love, like you mentioned, like none of these people, like every time they stop somewhere, somebody gets killed, loses their eye. But yet none of them think, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't keep going on this tour with a serial killer on the bus with me. I mean, I guess they're the ultimate tourists. They really want to tour Barcelona, no matter what. And also, and this kind of reminds me of what Erik had mentioned earlier, the finale, or one of the scenes where one of the girls like finally gets a clue and figures out who the killer is. Like she gets a proof of who the killer is, and instead of, I don't know, maybe going to the police or something, she finds out where one of the characters is that she wants to reveal this to, and he's touring this abandoned castle up on a hill. So she just runs up on the hill to find him. I mean, why would you go there to this abandoned area once you have proof who the killer is? I mean, why aren't you going to the cops? I don't understand her line of thinking with that, but, I mean, a lot of giallos don't make that much sense, so, why should I nitpick? But overall, I mean, I think it's a good enough movie. It's certainly trashy, which I love.
It's certainly trashy. That is true. How about you, Erik?
Yeah, I actually quite like Umberto Lenzi, I have to say. I mean, he made a film just previous to this. It wasn't a horror film, but it was a police crime thriller called Almost Human that I think is really, really well made. And most of his output is kind of trashy, and particularly when you think of his 80s stuff like Ghost House, Nightmare City, and maybe even his 70s stuff like Spasmo, they are quite silly and trashy. I think Eyeball is genuinely entertaining from start to finish, though. I mean, I don't get bored even with just the character interactions in between all the murders. I think they're quite fun. I love the fact that everyone is seen at one point acting suspiciously. You have the American guy with the Stetson who at one point is seen wielding a razor blade as he's shaving, but wielding it in a suspicious manner. And everyone has a motive. There's the psychotic ex-wife who may or may not be in Barcelona following the troop around, and then there's the over-the-top gurning of the priest. Coupled with that, there is some dodgy acting in there, particularly the character of Peggy, who is the girl who gets killed on the ghost train. She reacts to the fact that a knife-wielding killer is in front of her, with all the emotional sort of reaction of Gary Newman, maybe on Top of the Pops or something like that. And I love the fact that the girl, I think her name is Naiba, is it? The black girl, the lesbian girl. Her haircut changes in every scene. Now, I'm assuming she just has a variety of wigs with her, but you never see her changing wigs, as far as I can remember. I find it hard to keep track. Is that a different girl or is it the same girl? Because she has a different haircut. I mean, personally, I think her afro... Sorry?
I was going to say, back in the 70s, women used to wear wigs lots of... Because Susan Scott wears loads of different wigs in her films, so it is quite difficult to keep track of people, I find.
I know. I thought her afro look was my favourite, personally, because it had that disco chick look about her. Now, I was telling you, Justin, off air before we started recording that I've seen Eyeball many times, but I hadn't watched it for about 5 years until a few weeks ago, and I was convinced that a certain character was the killer, but I was completely wrong, and it's not the first time that I fingered the wrong person.
I'm sure it isn't, but
I set you up for that one. Sorry, that was me. That was me coming over all Kenneth Williams.
Oh, blimey.
I think we've lost somebody. We've lost Joseph.
Have we lost Joseph? Okay.
Yes.
Well, we will. Hold on. We'll be back. Don't panic. Don't panic.
Hi, this is Kelly Maroney from Shopping Mall and the Zero Boys, and you are listening to The Hysteria Continues.
Oh, well, okay. I think we've got Joseph back. Are you back with us, Joseph? One knock for yes. You are?
I'm here.
I'm here. Okay. Well, Erik, you were...
The Chattanooga choo-choo ran over his internet cable.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yes, I hate it when that happens.
Actually, it was your little fingering joke. I maybe dropped the phone from laughing.
My fingering jokes have that effect on people, I find. Yeah.
Erik, well, I'll come back to your views in a second, but because I just wanted to say that I think John Richardson as Mark Burton and Martine Brochard as Paulette Stone are probably one of the screen's most magical couples. And I have this little bit of dialogue just to give you an idea of the magic that was on screen.
And then I saw that she was holding a dagger in her hand, covered with blood. Yes, a dagger covered with blood. And on the ground next to her was a human eye. It was a nightmare. I remember that I cleaned the dagger off and put it back in its place in a drawer in my study. And then I dragged Alma Bartley up to her room. It was 2 p.m. The murder had been discovered a half hour earlier, about 100 yards down the road.
But no, it's absurd. She couldn't do a thing. And besides, this is Barcelona. Alma's in America.
Paulette, Alma's here in Barcelona.
Have you seen her?
Not yet, but I know she's here.
Yes, one of the great screen couples like Elizabeth Taylor and what's his name, Burton?
Richard Burton.
Sonny and Cher.
Sonny and Cher, exactly. Yeah, wonderful couple. Erik, you were saying you were interrupted.
Yeah, can I? Am I allowed to reveal the final twist, or are we?
I think we have to. If you haven't seen this film, then I would probably fast forward 5 minutes. Put it that way. Should we say that? And
yes.
Because we need to talk about the reveal, because it's probably one of the best reveals that I've ever seen in a giallo.
Yes,
most ridiculous. Definitely. So go for it, Erik.
Okay, well, the killer turns out to be whatever the character's name is, played by Martine Brochard. Is that her name?
Paulette.
Oh, whatever. Now, she had her eyeball removed as a youngster during a game of doctors and nurses that went tragically wrong. And Mark, who is her love interest, has known all along that she has a collection of glass eyeballs in her drawer, but he just assumed that they were trinkets or lucky charms, which was a hilarious little twist at the end. Yes.
But it's I love the way that what's even better for me is that the lesbian couple, Naiba, and also who's the other woman, the Myrta Miller, who was in loads of Paul Naschy movies, Argentinian actress.
Ooh, I love Paul Naschy.
Yeah, well, I bet you do, but she's taking photos of Naiba on the Ramblas, and if you don't know what the Ramblas, it's a big shopping sort of street kind of thing in Barcelona. And she's taking loads of photos, but in one of the photos, because Myrta, her character, is killed by the killer in a very brutal scene, actually. But she's taken, basically they have the film developed at the end, and that's how they find out who the killer is, because this hilarious moment where they look at the photograph and it's got Naiba posing in her hot pants and an afro, and behind her it's got Paulette with like a crazed look on her face with a knife in her hand posing behind the chrysanthemums. And I think it's just like such an amazing reveal. Absolutely hilarious. One of my favourite reveals ever, because I kept on thinking Lindsay must have had his tongue in his cheek with this, surely to God. And of course, this music, which I'm playing over and over again because it's so fantastic.
Yes.
But the film
plays over and over again in the film,
and it's one of my favourite ever.
Joke.
Yeah, it's one of my favourite ever giallo soundtracks. So
I imagine if you bought the score to Eyeball, bought the CD, it would probably be about 10 minutes long.
Yes, yeah, I know.
Because I bought the CD score to The Case of the Bloody Iris, or What Are These Strange Drops of Eyeliner on Justin's Body, I think it's called. And it is basically a 70-minute soundtrack, but 40 minutes of it are all the same. It's the same theme.
Over and over again?
Over and over and over again, yes.
Did you pick up What Are Those Strange Drops of Mayonnaise doing on Bob Hoskins' body?
I didn't. I'm still investigating. I think it was yogurt.
Was it yogurt? Okay.
Yeah.
Is there anything else we got to say about Eyeball? I've got a few bits.
I wanted to say...
I have a few bits, yeah.
Okay.
Well, see, mine's not trivia. It's just something I forgot to mention. I love the fact that every single loose end this movie could have had is wrapped up at the end. I mean, if you guys notice, like, he finds out, like, why he saw, his ex-wife in Barcelona. And he even asked the cops, questions like, how did you know this or that? So the cops, pretty much explain every single detail of how they knew what they knew. And it's funny to me because it's like Lindsay did not want to leave any loose ends in this movie at all.
Mm.
I love the way that Mark has to explain to Peggy the whole concept behind promotion, and I'm doing the inverted commas sign here as I say that, promotion. So he explains to her that, the way you find a free gift sometimes in your detergent? That's what's known as a promotion.
I know.
I'm always a fan of creating drinking games out of movies, and there is one in Eyeball. Every time the one character, I don't remember who he is, but when he's being questioned by the police or anyone, he says, "Oh, she's my secretary. I just got in a couple hours ago," and they do that like 30 times.
Mark.
Yeah. So every time he does that, just take a shot, and you'll be on the floor before the movie's over with.
Well, Justin's like that ananyway, regardless of if he's playing a drinking game.
Yeah,
that is true. I've actually run out of whiskey now.
Justin's not allowed to play. Anyone else is.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to be, I don't want to be arrested for, contributing to his alcohol poisoning.
I don't need any help there. Thank you very much. I've been very good, actually, recently. So, anyway.
Recently, as in the last 12 hours?
12 minutes. I ran out of drink. So, have we got anything else to say about this film, this wonderful film from Umberto Lenzi? Apart from, obviously, he did, as I said, he made quite a lot of other giallo. He also went on to make some... have we lost anyone? No, we're still here?
No.
He also went on to make some American-style slasher movies. He made... What was the films? I've got it written down here somewhere, and my notes are all over.
He did Welcome to Spring Break, didn't he?
That's the one. Yeah. And also, there was another one he did, which was... Well, it's Nightmare Beach, which is the same film, isn't it?
Yeah.
Hitchhiker in the Dark. I think it's another one that's supposed to be a
Hitcher in the Dark.
Hitcher in the Dark.
Yeah. Which is another kind of slasher-esque one. The film actually got lots of different titles. The direct translation, the Italian, is Cats in a Maze of Red Glass. And I know what it's like to be stuck with cats, because they're luckily I haven't got any at the moment. There's also Secret Killer, Wide-Eyed in the Dark. Interesting, the film was released in the States in 1978 on a double bill with Suspiria. So it's kind of a strange double bill, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
That you would have Suspiria on one hand, which is kind of not that cheesy, quite scary film, and then you've got a really cheesy giallo. But
I call it the class and ass double bill.
Do you know what? I would say Eyeball. I've watched Eyeball more times than any other giallo, and that's all I'm going to say. You know, I know Nathan. I know you were saying, Nathan, about being uninterested about what people are saying, but actually, I love all of that chit chat. It's so inane and forced and badly acted that I love it. You know, I love the mental wife, and I love the kind of the stings in the soundtrack. You know, when it goes bong bong like that, and it keeps on zooming in on the knife and the eyeball in one hand, and then there's a great bit where Mark realises his ex-wife can't be the killer because she's left-handed, and it goes bong, and it kind of zooms in on her drinking tea, and then bong, zooms in on her waving for a taxi or whatever it was, and then bong, you know, waving goodbye at a train station or something.
Bong over and over and over and over.
That's what. Well, I do love this film. It's my favourite of Umberto Lenzi's gialli, and it's my favourite trash gialli. I love What the Strange Drops of Blood doing on Jennifer's Body. That's another great trash giallo. But this has got to be my favourite. I must have watched this film, I would say, close to 25 times. So I probably shouldn't have said that. But anyway.
Wow.
You scare us.
Has anyone got anything else to say about?
I just want to say about the guy who plays the priest is a guy called George Rigaud. He's an Argentinian actor, and he's in a ton of gialli. Yes. He was in Case of the Bloody Iris, All the Colours of the Dark, Knife of Ice. He's in Lizard in a Woman's Skin, which I was talking about earlier. He was in Death Walks in High Heels. He's actually also, interestingly enough, in a Western called A Town Called Bastard. Now, just to let you know, there is actually
an island.
Sorry?
Is that an island?
Well, funny you should say that, because I'm just going to tell you there is a town in the southeast of Ireland called Bastardstown.
Really?
Believe it or not, Bastardstown.
You can go there and go, bastard!
Bastards! Yeah. And the other lead actor, John Richardson, who plays Mark, he's also in Torso. I can't remember the character's name he plays in Torso, but he is the lead sort of guy in Torso. So that's all I have to say about Eyeball.
So the preacher could be like a giallo mascot almost.
Well,
yeah, he could, yeah.
Yeah, because in a lot of films, the priest's the killer, isn't it? And that's probably why you thought he was the killer throughout, because...
I thought he was the killer throughout, and I was watching Eyeball going, oh my God, they make it so obvious he's the killer. But then I was completely thrown off because it was actually...
Because he's too nice. He's so nice.
He's very nice, isn't he? Yeah. Right, well, I think we better wrap up on Eyeball, just purely because we're at the 1 hour 50 mark already, and we haven't even got to Deep Red yet. So before we do that, I'm just going to go a little bit of... So...
Over and over
and over again.
Over and over and over.
But what you'll be pleased to hear, we're not going to hear that until maybe at the end. But what we are going to hear now is we're going to go into the trailer, the American trailer, for Dario Argento's Deep Red.
You're getting closer and closer to the most unnatural kind of death.
You have killed, and you will kill again.
Beyond shock, beyond horror, into total terror.
What was that?
Murder runs wild. Blood runs cold. Terror runs deep red. Everywhere you turn, death is running with you. Deep red. It'll put you into deep shock. Deep Red, rated R.
Right, that was the American trailer for Profondo Rosso, or as we know in the UK, Ireland and America, Deep Red. So, Joseph, take it away.
All right, an English jazz pianist living in Rome witnesses the brutal hatchet murder of a renowned psychic and is quickly drawn into the savage crime. With the help of a tenacious female reporter, the pair track a twisted trail of deranged clues and relentless violence towards a shocking climax that has ripped the screams from throats of audiences for more than 35 years. Deep Red is widely considered to be one of Argento's masterworks, and certainly I'm in agreement that it's one of his very best. Let's not kid ourselves here. Argento traverses the labyrinthine plot with aplomb, but as far as story goes, Deep Red is like many giallo in that plot usually plays second banana to visceral style. Deep Red's tale of a witness to a murder certainly becomes a little too long in the tooth and needlessly convoluted, but that's probably the only minor quibble I have with what is essentially a whirlwind of vivid colors and directorial flourishes. And Argento understands the mechanics of murder more than any director in the genre, and for that I give Deep Red a very high recommendation. And if you're a novice to the giallo style of terror, you could do a lot worse than starting with Deep Red. What do you think about Deep Red, Erik?
Well, I agree. I think it is fantastic. Not only do I think it is my favorite giallo, I think it's my favorite Argento movie, and I think it's one of my favorite films of all time. As I was saying, I think it's a great entry point for people who are new to the giallo. I mean, it has the traditional giallo elements. It has the black glove killer. It has the subjective camera work, the sort of everyman protagonist who's trying to solve the murder on his own without the help of the police. It has sort of the over-the-top cliche of the giallo, including sort of the gay character who's really effeminate, wears lots of eyeliner and a toga, and in this instance has a neck like a giraffe. And it also has the giallo trope of a clue that the killer can't quite figure out. He thinks something is missing or something is amiss, and he figures it out towards the end. What Argento does with Deep Red, though, that's different from other giallo, is that he makes it into not just a giallo but a proper horror movie. There's a slight supernatural element with the psychic at the start, but it's not overpowering. It's played straight as if it's a normal giallo. There's the spooky old house element. There's surreal elements as well, like the cackling dummy that comes storming into the room to distract the psychic's assistant. There's the hanging dolls from the ceiling, the creepy child song that plays over the tape recorder. There's sort of strange elements thrown in, like that child who tortures the lizards. And there's the gore is very much 80s style, over the top, with lots of sort of meat cleaver cuts to people's bodies and things like that. I think David Hemmings is excellent. I think Dario Nicolodi is excellent. Particularly in the English language version, she has a voice. Her voice is dubbed in a wonderfully ditzy style that I think adds to the film. There's comedic elements to it in the Italian version, which runs just slightly over 2 hours, that normally would kind of bother me. But in this instance, I think they work really well, and the character dynamics are really fun to watch. There's tons of stylistic flourishes within the film that are typical Argento. You know, you have extreme close-ups of objects, including a great scene where camera pans over a record player stylus as it's playing the child song. You have a scene with Marcus, played by David Hemmings, and Carlo. They're at opposite ends of this widescreen image with this huge statue overpowering them. It's just a sort of everyday dialogue scene between the two, but it's just so stunningly framed that it this is what really sets Argento's work apart. And it's got this fantastic MacGuffin in it about the missing painting that David Hemmings is it's always playing on his mind, saying, "What's our painting moved from the crime scene? What am I missing? There's something wrong here." Deep Red was the first giallo I ever saw. I bought the Redemption video release in the early 90s. And I think if I had seen any other giallo at that time, I probably would have been turned off the genre. Because it was Deep Red and it was so stunning and so brilliant, I think that's what turned me on to the giallo genre, and pursued me to seek out the Sergio Martino stuff and even Umberto Lenzi stuff. I think Deep Red is a masterpiece, and I can't find any fault with it whatsoever. The only fault I can apply to the film is that the child actor who plays the young Carlo in the flashback towards the end of the film is a bit naff, to be honest. But otherwise, 10 out of 10 for me. Brilliant. I love it.
Well, I was going to say the only fault that I really found with it is that it was a little too long, but it's only a minor quibble. But
one of the things I wrote down in my notes was it makes 126 minutes seem like half the length to me, because normally I suffer from attention deficit disorder, to be honest. So long films tend to drag for me, but in this case they didn't.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a major quibble. It's just a minor one for me. But one of the things I wanted to mention that you mentioned was the plot MacGuffin. Well, Argento kind of understands, what Hitchcock would do is focus on this object that drives the story, but he would actually pay it off. Whereas a lot of films, it's someone has something like a briefcase or a bomb that drives the story forward, and then they forget about it. The actual painting, which, spoiler alert, turns out to be a mirror showing the killer's face, actually drives the story forward, and they use it at the end to reveal who the killer is. And I think he did a really good job of, using that as a MacGuffin, but, paying it off at the end. And you mentioned the scene with a little mannequin coming in through the door towards the camera really quick. Now, I think the creators behind the Saw films owe a lot to that, because obviously the Billy doll in the Saw films is definitely taken from Deep Red. I mean, there's no mistaking that. The cackling.
The dummy is called Billy in Saw, is it? I never knew that.
Yeah, it's Billy. Yeah, they call it Billy.
Yeah, I had written that down, saying it's obviously Saw have ripped this off or inspired.
And I'm not 100% sure, but I think in Dead Silence, they do the film they make about the dolls. I think you can see that an image of the Deep Red doll in the background. I'll have to rewatch it, but I'm pretty sure they pay homage to that. But no, thank you. What about you, Nathan?
Oh, I've always loved Deep Red. I think it's one of Argento's best. I like the opening or the scene with the psychic. Her death scene, I think, is really, really well done and actually very brutal. Nobody can quite do a death scene like Argento can. Like, he can film them in these amazing ways. I mean, he's really talented when it comes to that. My only complaint about the movie, it's not even really about the movie. It's just about the scene you mentioned, obviously still spoiler alert, where, the painting on the wall towards the beginning of the movie, it turns out it's a mirror. When I first watched it, I didn't pick up on that at all. So, I mean, I was actually surprised when they revealed it. But every single person I've shown that movie to has picked up on it right away. As soon as they've seen it, they said, "Hey, what's that? Rewind it."
Oh, really?
Yes, even like my mom, who is the worst person at picking out whodunits. Like, even her, when it showed that scene, she was like, "Who is that standing right there?" And I was like, "Are you kidding me?"
I love the fact that when you rewind and watch the start of the film, they don't cheat you on that at all. They actually reveal it.
Yeah.
I love it. It's not like it was a painting. She actually stood there in that scene.
Yeah,
so
I think that's brilliant, yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I love that they did it, and I love that I didn't catch it. But I just hate the fact that everybody I show it to, somehow they catch it. I don't know how, but I guess
people are more sophisticated these days, I think.
Yeah.
But anyway, Deep Red is an amazing movie. It's really well done. I can't find really any fault with it.
All right, Mr. Kurzweil.
Right.
Take it away.
Well, all I can do is echo what's already been said. I mean, Deep Red is a fantastic movie, and say it's probably one of the best giallos ever made. I mean, it's obviously it came. Both this and Eyeball came quite late in the day. The giallo's heyday was really sort of 70 to 73. By 75, the Italians have pretty much stopped making giallo in as many, as they were making in the early 70s. And the kind of emphasis kind of changed to polizia, which were kind of like crime movies with lots of very angry, buff, kind of machismo Italians driving around beating each other up. And so the giallo that we know it from the early 70s had kind of changed quite a lot, and it became things like What Have They Done to Your Daughters, which kind of mixed the giallo and the polizia together. So Deep Red was actually, in some ways, a kind of pastiche, I kind of guess, of the giallo, because it's full of the kind of humour you didn't really get in the earlier giallo. I mean, Argento's films always had a little bit of humour undercut, through them. But interestingly, the version that we've seen, which I presume we've all seen, is the kind of the longer version, because it was released in America as the Hatchet Murders at the cinema. I'm not sure when, must have been 76, 77. But it had a lot cut out, and it was cut down to probably about 80 or 90 minutes. And that's the version that I think I saw originally, was the kind of American version. And in some ways I actually prefer that, because a lot of the comedy is cut out of it. It's a much more serious film without the comedy. But having said that, the David Hemmings and Darren Acoldi play off each other really well. The comedy works, but what it does do, it takes away from the horrific elements of the film and the thriller elements, and in some ways actually prefer the tighter, cut of it. What else about it? I mean, what Erik was saying about the Argento's fetishistic ways of shooting things. I mean, it's the most beautifully shot film. He won't just shoot a scene like some directors will just film a static scene. He will do things like he'll basically get a macro lens and look at someone playing a record, and he'll do a zoom really close in on the needle of the record and things like that. It gives it all that kind of visual interest. It's also Goblin, who did the soundtrack, who probably best known for the soundtrack, doing soundtrack to his cut of Dawn of the Dead and also Suspiria. This film kind of, I think someone's already mentioned about there's some supernatural elements to it with the psychic, but it also preempts Suspiria, which is his next film, with the kind of the soundtrack bits of it. Like there's a shot of him in a library, I think, and he's looking, and there's a long shot looking in at him, and there's a kind of creepy soundtrack going, and it's kind of a bit like, very similar to the soundtrack that's used in Suspiria the next year. I also really like the way that the killer is the really raspy voice of the killer. It's kind of real kind of like, I'm gonna get you, like this through the door. There's a bit similar to A Bird in Crystal Plumage, where the killer tries to kill Susie Kendall, and it's the same where you've got David Hemmings just swapped over, and the gender role has been changed with David Hemmings as the woman in peril, essentially. And there's a great scene where he's playing the piano, and he knows that someone's come into his apartment, and he's just waiting for the right moment, and he's playing the piano with one hand, so he can run to the door and shut it.
Oh, I love that scene. I love that scene. That is fantastic.
And when he does that, and then the killer's the killer's got that voice behind, and it's just really creepy. And also, obviously, the gore and the violence is turned up to 10 with this. I mean, it's very, very gory, and you can see why. Scenes were lifted for other later slasher movies, and probably most famously or infamously is the scene where the woman has her face boiled off in the bath, which was ripped off shamelessly in Halloween 2. The sequel to John Carpenter's Halloween 2 in 1981.
Was that a Carpenter shot insert, or was that a Rick Rosenthal original? Do you know?
I think that was originally in there, but whether or not it went back to make it more gory, because I know Carpenter went back to shoot stuff to make it more violent. So I'm not sure with that one. But I really like it, and all that kind of the creepiness with the children's, that turning nursery rhymes and those children's songs into something really creepy and otherworldly, and that house where the original murder took place. It's the most amazing set. Well, it's not even a set. I presume it's a real house. This kind of amazing Art Deco crumbling mansion, which is brilliant. I mean, the only thing that I find upsetting about the film, which I don't like, and it's one of the things that bugbear with a lot of Italian films, is kind of the animal cruelty, and certainly in this film, there's a shot of dogs fighting, which there's no real reason for that to be in there. I don't really understand why it's there. And the other one, which is the most infamously, is the shot where the little girl has put a pin through a live lizard who's kind of writhing in agony on the floor. There's also a shot where a bird is stabbed through with a pin, which looks like a live bird. And in the same way, somewhere like a film like his Dario Argento's Opera, it's obvious that the birds in that are being bashed around for real, which is quite curious because Dario Argento is actually a vegetarian. How long he's been vegetarian, I don't know, but it is a bugbear of mine with Italian movies, and certainly, although Umberto Lenzi didn't do it in Eyeball, of course he did it in the most horrendous way in films like Cannibal Ferox, which I saw on a double bill with Cannibal Holocaust back in about 1987 on video, and I haven't seen either of them since for obvious reasons. But
they're both are really hard to stomach because of that. I mean, I'd much prefer to watch a really, really fake looking dismemberment of an animal.
Yeah,
you know, if they had to go that route, or route, as they'd say in America.
Well, it's like
they're so good at creating these gore effects. Why can't they do the same for animals? Why do they actually have to kill animals?
I know. Well, I mean, Lucio Fulci did it.
Ruggero Deodato's defense was, the savage tribes in the jungle would have done it anyway, so what's the harm? But I don't think that's an excuse, to be honest.
No. I mean, the fact is, it's filmed, it's turned into entertainment, and that's where it changes from where the moral argument goes out the window when it's done really for titillation, basically, shock value. I think Umberto Lenzi's does it even worse in Cannibal Ferox. There's even less of justification in that, but it's still
the snake scene is awful. And where the snake is going to kill the little animal. Although we find out later it didn't die, but it's just the fact that when they're telling the story behind the scenes, Giovanni Lombardo Radice was saying that during that scene, like Umberto Lenzi was upset that the snake was not actually killing the animal, and he kept making the crew film it till it eats the animal. He said that finally the crew pretty much said, if you don't stop, then we're going to quit.
Yeah.
So the animal did survive, even though it kind of looks like it didn't in the movie, but Giovanni confirmed that it did live. But it's just the fact, I mean, I don't know why that scene was important. Like, why did you want to feed this snake?
No.
Like, to that
it really has no relevance to the plot whatsoever.
No.
I mean, it's a different time, but it's still...
Can I just say that the version of Deep Red I saw originally was released on the Redemption label in the early 90s, and it was cut by 11 seconds. And those 11 seconds consisted of the lizard with the pin through its head and the dogs fighting. Because, animal cruelty, and I respect this decision of the BBFC was a no-no back then. Now it has been released uncut since, I believe, so.
Yeah. But, yeah,
I wanted to say, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go on.
I was just going to go back to the where you said David Hemmings basically becomes kind of the woman in peril role. This kind of segues into my question. First, I like how they kind of Argento turns the tables, making the typical man in the film is always the hero. He kind of makes him the weaker sex, and the women are the ones of empowerment. They have that arm wrestling scene where she beats him in arm wrestling, and then. Spoiler alert, the killer turns out to be a woman, but going into my question is, did either of you actually guess that it was Carlo's mother, and did you guess the actual mirror painting twist when you first saw the film?
That would be a big, massive no on my part. Because
I did. I picked up on it. I was one of the ones that...
Well, for starters, I'm useless at guessing killers in movies. And secondly, I didn't pick up on the mirror image thing at the start of the film at all.
I think one of the reasons you might not have done, and probably the reason I didn't as well, is when I originally saw it on a bootleg VHS, God knows how many years ago, which had been panned and scanned to within an inch of its life. And without that kind of the aspect ratio of a kind of widescreen, Lucio Fulci always used to get attacked for filming the bridges of people's noses. And the reasons, because of that, he wasn't doing that. He was doing close-ups of eyes. But when they pan and scans, well, not even pan and scan, they just zoomed in on the middle of the screen. All you were left was the bridge of someone's nose. And so the similar with this film is that if you have something happening on the side of the screen, it gets cut out. So I saw this probably 20 years ago. So I don't remember, if I twigged that it was the mother, but probably not. But to my defence, it was probably something to do with the fact that I saw a really bad bootleg version, which even if it did show that, was probably an nth degree dupe, which would have probably looked like, watching it through, I don't know, sort of fishbowl or something, a dirty fishbowl. So that's my excuse.
The only film that I have guessed the killer correctly in is Friday the 13th, Part 5. And that's only because
that's pretty obvious.
Yeah, I know.
The only one, Eric?
Yeah, that's the only one.
Gosh.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
What about Halloween?
We should show you.
Well, no, I did guess who the killer was in Halloween, in fairness.
Okay.
Yes.
That's good.
We should show you Slaughter Studios, see if you guess the killer in that.
I haven't seen
Nobody I know has guessed the killer in that.
Even I did not guess the killer in Slaughter Studios, and I guess them pretty much 95% of the time. That one really threw me for a loop.
Okay.
Yeah, but I'm
guess
surprised at you, though.
I guess the killer in the Amanda Knox murders.
Oh.
How topical, Eric.
I am topical of everything else.
Of course.
You didn't guess the killer at an All-American Murder, Joseph, and even I guessed that one.
No, because I saw that when it first came on cable back in '91, and I was a lot younger then.
Oh, that's your excuse.
Yes.
Well, have we got any background information you want to talk about?
I do. A tiny little bit.
Yeah.
It was released in Japan prior to 1977, I assume, as Hysteria Part 2, which is a bit strange. The other thing I wanted to say about it was that...
Wait a minute. Doesn't it predate Suspiria by a year?
It does, yeah, but I'm assuming it was released post-77 in Japan as Hysteria Part 2. The other thing I thought about the Goblin score. Now, I know that we all think probably that John Carpenter's Halloween score was inspired by Goblin's music to Deep Red, but I think the Deep Red score was itself inspired by Tubular Bells by Mike Oldfield, which was used in The Exorcist. What do you guys think?
I reckon so. I mean, yeah, no, it could be. I mean, do you like Goblin?
I do. I love Goblin, I have to say.
Okay.
I love their score. Well. I love their scores to Suspiria and Tenebrae. I know they weren't credited as Goblin in Tenebrae, but it was, for all intents and purposes, Goblin. But,
you notice the trailer I made for the Hysteria Continues has a very Goblin-esque soundtrack.
No, I was just thinking that, like, if somebody like Bruno Nicolai, who scored Eyeball and scored a lot of giallos around that time, if he had scored Deep Red, I think it would have been a much different film. If it had a cheesy, loungy Hammond organ style score.
Dun, 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 dun,
Did you know
exactly? If it had that type of score to it, it wouldn't have been half the film. I think Goblin really made it. I mean, I know their music is kind of dated and has kind of a prog rock sound to it, but I think it really suits Deep Red.
But did you know that? Well, I don't know if because I was just reading up about this, and it did have an original soundtrack by another composer that Dario Argento didn't like, and he went to England.
Oi!
Well, you can understand why. But he went to England to see if he could get Pink Floyd to do the soundtrack, and they said no.
Do you know that Jess Franco originally wanted Pink Floyd to score Bloody Moon?
Yes, yeah, that's right.
You mentioned that on an earlier podcast.
Yeah.
But I think that's
called Dark Side of the Bloody Moon.
But I think that's why Argento wanted something different. So basically he got rid of the I've never heard the original soundtrack, and maybe it was never released. But that's why he got Goblin involved in it, because he wanted something progressive, I kind of guess. And although it sounds very dated now, it was obviously known as progressive rock. And so that's why he went with that, something quite modern at the time. So yeah, okay. I've got a few bits, but what about?
Well, the other thing I had to say about it was that this is probably a well-known fact, is that the bar that you can view in the sort of square that Carlo and Marcus are in is a reconstructing of a famous painting by Edward Hopper from 1942 called Nightmares. Argento was hugely influenced by the painting, so he actually built a set to look like the painting. This kind of 70s or 50s style diner with people in it.
That's right, yeah. So, okay. Well,
That's
thank you,
it.
Eric. Thank you. What about you, Joseph? Have you got any background?
No background this week, sorry.
That's okay. What about you, Nathan?
No, I don't have anything this week.
Okay. Oh, you all sound so sad. Cheer up, love. You'll better do another Splatter University or something soon. So,
I already picked out my next one, so don't worry. Y'all are going to love it.
All right. Well, I've got a few little bits.
Well, my contract is up, so I'll see you guys later.
The close-up shots of the killer's hands were clad in black leather gloves were performed by Dario Argento himself, and he tends to play the killer or the gloves. The shots when you see the gloved hands in his films. The Argento shot the film in Turin, partly because it was known as having the second biggest population of Satanists in Europe. Quite why he did that, I don't know, but he decided the city was magical, and it certainly looks quite magical. It's got like kind of otherworldly look to it, like Berlin does in Suspiria. He chose David Hemmings, because he was in Blow Up, Antonioni's Blow Up from 1966, which is kind of like an art house giallo in some ways, and so he wanted him to do it. He also wanted David Hemmings to play, but David Hemmings was too fat for Dario Argento, so he put him on a diet, and he said he wanted the only thing to be big was the movie itself, not his star. So he got David Hemmings to lose a couple of stone before he played the lead, which is probably just as well when you see the scenes of him clambering around the outside of the house, because obviously if he was any bigger, then the whole thing would have come down. Dario Nicoldi and Dario Argento fell in love on this film and got married, and their progeny was Asia Argento and also Fior Argento, who he beheads in Phenomena. So what else is there? Dario Argento himself actually cut the film by 26 minutes, and when you watch the American DVD version, it's got the scenes only in Italian, and those are the bits, obviously all the bits he cut out of it. So Dario Argento, the director's cut of Deep Red is actually the shorter version. It's the one that Dario Argento prefers. The longer version is for completists like us, but it's not the one he prefers himself. It was released in America as The Hatchet Murders, and is actually a public domain film now, so anyone can put it out. And lastly, it's still mooted for a remake. Now, Dario Argento has gone on record as saying that he would go to court to stop people remaking his films, including Suspiria and Deep Red. It sounds like he's kind of mellowed on this, because Suspiria is in the early stages of being remade, and George A. Romero was due to be doing a remake of Deep Red in 3D. Now, whether or not that was actually true, or that was actual reals really going to happen, I don't know, but that was doing the rounds a little while ago. So, well, there you go. I mean, that's Deep Red, and I'm sure we're going to come back and do maybe another giallo double bill at some point in the future. But have you guys got anything else you'd like to say about Deep Red or Eyeball or giallos?
Well, did you know that Argento originally wanted Corey Feldman and Molly Ringwald to play the leads in Deep Red?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
That's an exclusive for you.
Yeah, but Molly Ringwald would have been about 3 years old.
On the internet.
He wanted to score the film with Toya.
Yeah, he did. How did you know that? I thought I was the only one who knew that.
One interesting thing I forgot to say was, I don't know if you know that the Marco's gay lover in the film,
the one with the neck like a giraffe,
was actually a woman. It's played by a woman. Yeah, it's played by a woman, but dubbed by a man. Because if you look at her, she hasn't got an Adam's apple. So it's actually the whole thing of the misdirection is actually, it's, if you look her up, it's actually a woman playing a man.
I did not know that.
Yes, and also Dario Argento said that he wanted to do. He's had gay characters. He had a gay character in one of his early films. I think it was Captain Nine Tails, or was it Four Flies and Grey Velvet? I can't remember. The detective in one of them. He actually wanted to do a giallo back in the early 70s with all the characters were gay men. So it never happened, but probably for obvious reasons. He probably couldn't get that funded. But so it's quite an interesting thing. He's very interested. And of course, in Tenebrae, he famously had the flashback played by a transsexual woman. So he's got he loves that whole idea of.
Eve Robbins or Eva Robbins.
Eva Robbins, yeah. So he's got that whole thing. And of course, unfortunately with Dario Argento is that out of all of the classic directors, I mean, none of them, in my mind, are making particularly good films now. Wes Craven's is serviceable at best. John Carpenter, I saw The Ward. That was actually a film I forgot to mention I saw, which is fine, but it's John Carpenter on autopilot. Toby Hooper, less said the better. But Dario Argento is probably making the worst films. Like Lucio Fulci went right downhill at the end, making some real shit like Cat in the Brain. But I still can't bring myself to watch Giallo, his latest film. And of course, at the moment, he's filming.
You're not missing anything.
Have you seen it?
Yes.
And
it's a police procedural. That's all it is, and it's really boring.
Boring is. It's not even fun on a trashy level now.
No, I actually fell asleep. It's that boring.
Gosh, because
I thought Sleepless was serviceable, but that's about.
I thought Sleepless was okay, and I thought the card player was fun in a trashy way.
Yeah, it's just when you. It's just he's gone so much off the boil, especially if you watch something like Deep Red and you look at the attention to detail and the love and everything that he puts into it. I mean, every shot is so carefully crafted, and then you look at something like The Card Player or the Third Mother picture, which is pretty awful. And you think, well, what happened? Is he just making films to pay for his extension or whatever? I don't know.
I think I read a review of early Argento. I think it was Hysteria or one of those early films that are lauded, and the critic said that you could take any frame from the film and put it in an art gallery. Yeah. Whereas with The Third Mother or The Card Player or whatever, or The Phantom of the Opera, that's just not the case.
No.
You have to assume that Argento is probably getting up there in years, so he may not have the tenacity that he once had, in his younger years. So.
And the budget has gone way down for his films as well, so you have to forgive him for that as well.
Yes,
he's basically. I think a lot of his films now are being funded, through America. So he's probably not getting the kind of funds that he was, in his native land.
Mm-hmm. Well,
I mean, the golden years of Italian cinema have long passed, I think, at this stage.
Yeah, it's a shame.
And we hope that we have taken you back to those golden years with this episode.
Yes.
Exactly. Well, we better wrap things up because I've looked at the time and I realise I've got to be out of here very shortly. I've got a 70s cocktail party to go to, and hopefully nobody will be murdered. But just say thank you for joining us again. I hope you enjoyed that Giallo episode. We will be back in a fortnight with something probably, I don't know what we're doing, but we'll be discussing that shortly. But I have a feeling it'll probably be slightly more 80s tinged, but we shall see. But what we shall do, we'll play you out with some more from Eyeball.
Over and over and over.
Over and over again. Thanks for joining us. Take care.
Da, 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 da,
forget I'm no night fighter. Inspector, this person looked like a big cat. A big red sort of crimson cat.
Ah. Well, I must say that's interesting.